All right, here we are at the meetup talking about FileMaker certification, part 2. So we did one of these 2 days ago. 3 hours is a really long meetup. So I think the first part will probably have a little just kind of social and generic questions and stuff like that, go on video. The last time we covered really the first part of the FileMaker or the Claris study guide. Fields, relationships, and got through to calculations. So today is going to be scripts, security, deployment, a couple of other things I can't remember. Basically the second half of that guide, starting with scripts, and which of course links to a lot of calculations and things. So again, the main thing that we're looking for here is to for those of us who have a lot of experience, and there's a few of us on here who have worked with FileMaker for a really long time, to share what we remember from the cert test, the types of questions that get asked, and just really good general FileMaker knowledge. Best practices are certainly good to talk about, even though they're not on the cert test per se. And yeah, and then just kind of go through the things in order. So anybody, I don't know, anybody got fun news to share, things going on in the world? That's not politics?
You mean that's not FileMaker related?
Well, FileMaker or not FileMaker. There was a partner meeting day before yesterday. Was there anything public and interesting from that? People can share. I wasn't
Did not attend. I stayed here with you guys, so I haven't heard anything yet.
Yeah, I didn't either. I know some people in this meeting actually left and went to that and then came back. I play with Claris Studio a lot, and I'm seeing new features which are kind of exciting. One of them is that now it supports Markdown. So when you're making a form, you can use all the Markdown keyboard shortcuts, which are pretty good. Definitely stuff you cannot do in FileMaker so easily and reliably. We'll talk a little bit about Claris Pro versus FileMaker too as we go. Obviously, Claris Pro is not on the cert test, or hasn't been on it so far because it wasn't out when they nailed down the cert test. But it's going to have to be on one coming up. And I know Claris is considering changing certification to make it more specialized. And I really know that they don't know what they're going to do yet. So I think they're looking for ideas maybe, or
that was going to be one of my questions today. How often are they updating it? When they pushed this new version out last year, I think, maybe late 2020, when they pushed that out, are they updating it in the last year, or it's not getting updated regularly?
It was, they had it version by version and then when 19 came out, they stopped doing versions. 19 is like 2.5 years old now, 3 years old, something like that, because we're at 19.6. And they have not had an update since they originally came out with the test. And they're not calling it a version now. They're just calling it, like, I can't remember the name, it's a more of a generic name.
Yeah, I know you have to get recertified every 2 years. I'm just wondering if they're updating the exam as they go, because they're not doing it version by version. Hey, the new version's out. These are the questions for that version. Now we've got a new one. If they're not doing that and they're not changing the versioning, are they kind of modifying those questions and starting to at some point throw in things like Studio and whatever in there?
Not to my knowledge. And also, I didn't know that you had to get recertified every 2 years. I thought it was recertified when a new test came out.
No, that was part of the change for this one, is that your certification is good for 2 years.
So that would mean you'd have to retake the exact same test. That's really silly.
Well, that's why I'm wondering, are they constantly updating it with the new information? And that's why it's the same test, because it's not the same test.
Got it. Huh.
Yeah. Well, your certificate is valid for 2 years from the date of the certificate. That's totally, you're right, Beth. And I read, or I think I read though, but I kind of assumed, I understood what happened was there would constantly be updates. So like next time you take the test in 2 years' time, there will be new questions. They will just be updating in the background. So you might take a test one day and someone will take it a week later. There might be some different questions in there, but you wouldn't know. That's what I understood. Now, if they're actually doing that, how to prove it, I have no idea. But that's what I thought the whole point was, so that they're keeping up to date.
Yeah, even the first people to pass the new test, it hasn't hit 2 years for them yet. So we don't have any way to prove that.
I was just wondering that because I always take it right when it comes out and I'm like, did it go more than 2 years? Am I technically no longer certified?
Check your dates. The thing is, Matt, though, you'll know very well, I only started, I think, 15, but I'm sure you're certified forever. The test didn't change like massively from version to version, was it? There was like a few new questions but most of it was the same. So I'm assuming it'll be something like that. Is that how you see it?
It's definitely very similar to what it was before. Actually, this version of the test no longer has the questions about all the capability or the different specs. Like there's been previous versions of the test that say, which of these 5 versions of Linux is FileMaker server compatible with? And those types of questions are not on there anymore. You know, how many gigabytes of data can a text field store? Not on there anymore. How many decimal places in a number field? Not, those kind of things are not there.
That's because they no longer need a bunch of questions that Stephen Gallagher could write. Just saying. I'm not kidding. That's literally why they were there. But I mean, I was formerly on the committee that wrote questions, so many moons ago when Stephen was on. But the whole 2-year thing seems ridiculous because think about it. Like if you did the unmat, if you took the test right before some whole new version or something, you know, big changes came out, you would be considered all current and certified for 2 years, even though like you got in just before there were all of these massive changes and you might not know anything about them. Whereas, I mean, like 2 years from when you took it, it's not like you need to remember CPR. I mean, this like just seems
plus
weird.
Can't you actually take the 18 test still right now?
I don't think so. I think they turned that off the month that the new one was released, or there was like a 2-week gap or something. Because that was when I was first looking. And a coworker took 18 and then within 2 months took this one. So I know his 2 years are up in July. So if I remember correctly, it was May of 2021 that the new test came out. So nobody's hit the 2-year mark yet, but they're coming close.
I guess the beta testers, they actually don't give you your pass fail until like well after the real test comes out, which is weird, but.
Well, in a way, that's not so weird, but it also raises the question of how often they can refresh the test, because the reason they can't give you your score is because part of the beta test is to figure out which, which questions didn't cut it for one reason or another. And those questions are dropped. Like they're either too easy, too hard, or there's a mismatch in the correlation, which is to say the smart people got it wrong and the not so smart people got it right. Or the experienced people got it wrong and the inexperienced people got it right. So the point is you only have so much of a question bank until you do another beta test, right? Because you get a certain body of questions that cut muster and a bunch that didn't, that literally get thrown away. And eventually, you know, unless you make the beta testers take a 12-hour test instead of an hour test, you're going to run out of questions. So.
Yeah, or some other related kind of a thing. I think what I heard, which is exactly what you said, is any question on a beta that everybody gets right, or almost everybody gets right, they delete. And any question that everybody gets wrong, they delete. So it sort of self-selects to the middle. Let's see, we have a new person.
Yeah, that's basically right. I mean, it's within a range, but yeah.
One new person joined the meetup group. We had, like, after announcing this thing, I think we had 20 or more new people join the meetup, which is pretty great. And this meeting on Wednesday had 46 people in it. Wait, 64 people in it. I knew that those two digits, which is huge.
All about you, Matt.
It's all about offering something useful for free. People love that, and it feels so good to just have community and see all of you, even many of you who I cannot see and would like to, like Eric Matthews. And by the way, Eric, how did you get your name big on the Zoom thing? That's next level Zoom stuff.
No, it's just a picture, so like other people's pictures.
Aha. So you have like a photo, but in the same font kind of as the name thing. Okay.
And I didn't brush my hair this morning, so.
Oh, no, I didn't either, but that's why I put the headphones on to cover that. Yeah, like what other, oh, there's Alexi. It's good information to kind of know like the history of the test and how it's kind of changed. I'm really glad to know the tier thing. One of the other reasons I do these is because I always learn something. I learned a few good things yesterday or day before yesterday. And yeah, that's always really good. Also, it's really fun. Like as we go, we're going to do, when we talk about a specific question, I will, and anyone who wants to can share FileMaker and throw up a little demo and kind of work through one of the little gotcha questions that they have on the test a lot. Because they'll sometimes ask for things that you wish would be features and they're not, or things like that we'll kind of go over.
Do you think transactions will be on the test?
No, that's brand new in 19.6. I think it's going to be on the next one. Did anybody go to Vince's presentation yesterday?
I did.
I would actually love to briefly talk about them. I haven't actually seen his demo yet. I played with it a little bit. I actually found some circumstances where they actually greatly slow things down. If you're just doing one thing, it's like 10 times slower.
Oh, yeah, he's got solutions for that too. I mean, sense, if you've seen his other transactions seminars, he about performing script on server, or he's got a couple different solutions to speed that up. Yeah, well, like if you're doing just a new record and you're making like 10 new records or 100 or whatever, and you put that in a loop in a transaction, it actually doesn't run any faster. Whether you do the individual step or the loop in a transaction. So I think what it really is for is having a bunch of things that all need to be committed at the same time. Right. And it's not about faster, it's actually about better, more reliable, and having that undo feature if there's an error. And he showed all different things that would cause it to, reject the transaction, which is a good thing, right? If you got certain error messages from validation or anything else that could cause something to go off, what would and wouldn't cause the transaction to go ahead and not commit. Yeah. Well, since we're talking about it, like what things? Oh man, that's me to remember. I had a headache last night. I think that. So,
may I answer that, Eric? So if you have, if you check every step in your script as if it was successful, to see if it was successful, rather than doing that stripmatic, you can do it with the commit transaction, I think it is, right? And if something didn't work out, you would get an error back. So it makes the script more reasonable, readable.
One of the things that was kind of interesting that didn't make it fail was you had an example where a field was missing. Like you had a field there and it was going to get set, and then all of a sudden it's not there because maybe that file's down or somebody changed the database. That didn't make it fail. It just kept on going. So. Well, FileMaker always kind of skips past errors though. But that's certainly the point of calculations is for it, or transactions is for it to not do that.
Like set a field that's a calculation field and try to write data into it, that should fail. Set a field that the user has locked, set a field that you don't have access to from security. But I think he probably covered all of that. He's been talking about transactions for over a decade. Him and Todd Geist and a couple of others have really been on that page for a long time. Any other thoughts, announcements, and things like that? I actually have an announcement that I think about it. I just rolled out yesterday a new series of classes that I'm teaching called the career class, the career track. Four of my students are in this class right now. We're finishing up the first round, but the next part of it starts in January 17th. It's open to any new hire employee of a partner. And the goal is to go to this class, which lasts for 3 months, meeting once a week, and with homework. And there's a whole bunch of other features that if you have questions, I can send you more information. To basically turn you from a pretty new developer to someone who really has skills to work with FileMaker in 3 months. And the people who are on here, I'm proud of because they totally all did that. So next time, I'm hoping to have somewhere between 5 and 10 people. I'm only going to have 10 people limit in the class each time, and I'm hoping to do it 3 times a year. So that's my new life. All I do is training now, and that's the first sort of training product that I'm launching. End of shameless plug. So if you know anyone who's interested, wait, I guess I didn't end the shameless plug, then hit me up. Let's see. I've actually taught this certification prep before. I've tried to cram it into 3 hours, which is not possible for the whole entire series. I've also taught it over a 4-day period, 8 hours a day in person years ago. We're going to be somewhere in the middle, trying to cover all the topics in 6 hours over 2 days. Let's see. So I added a bunch of detail to a database that I use, or to my document that I use for teaching, with a lot of details about each segment. So since we're starting with scripts, we can kind of dive into that a little bit, a lot of it. Who has ideas? Who can remember some of the script questions that show up, things that we can talk through or show?
Well, I'll kick off. Hi, Matt. I'm going to have to jump out early again. I remember, I think the question that's always there is to do with when you've got scripts deleting records and you've sort of got a couple of tables, you know what I mean? So it's a good little question, because it's like you do what do? You do a kind of go to layout. I think you do a go to layout and you delete some records and something like that. And you end up, it's like the question is, what's the result? How many records are you left with? It's to do with like go to related records.
And it was like a PSOS question. It was like, if you run it locally, how many records would you have? And if you run it PSOS, how many records would you have? Something like that.
Actually, that's a different one. I think they added that when they added PSOS. That's right. But they're kind of similar ones in there. And I can't really remember the question, but it's a good little question, because it's like to really be careful. Well, context is what it comes down to. If you, I think, isn't it? That's the point of it. Yeah, PSOS. That's right. PSOS, because you have to remember to put go to layout. You put go to layout and then you do PSOS, but you have to do go to layout again, right? Or in the PSOS script. Yeah. Or you run it. That's right. You run it from a layout. That's how it works. They tell you, you're on this layout, you run this script, what happens? Right. And there's PSOS in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And your script doesn't say go to layout, but the question tells you you're on a layout. That's kind of the trick of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Where you have to just know with PSOS is it starts from whatever the default context is. They don't talk about on the cert test that whatever the startup script runs, that whole thing will run. And if it's like doing a secondary user login, setting a bunch of other defaults, switching to a bunch of different layouts, kind of setting up the whole environment for a user that a lot of systems do, none of which is important on server side. That, you know, those things will all happen. So not only does it not go to the layout that you want unless you expressly say it, but it can do all those other things, which is why usually we put a little bit of code in the onOpen script of every database we work on. And here I'll start with the screen sharing. Oh, look at that. So we put this code in here that checks the application version. And if there's the word server, the pattern count is in it, it stops. That way, none of the other startup script stuff runs, including logging. So it can just get past it all and then go ahead and do the server side stuff. Also, if you have, what was I just going to say? It's fun when things jump right out of your head, isn't it? Well, it'll come back in a minute. Because I was just thinking of what I was going to do now is actually run that example script like the one you were just talking about. So create a new one that does something like, okay, I'll learn how to type test script. So like if you're in a context of a customer and then you have a script that just says new record, and then you run this, it's obviously going to work at whatever context you put it on here. If you take the same script and you call it from some other layout, it'll run there. But then I think they were talking about was like a loop. And they had something like, I don't know, can you remember the details of what that thing did for the delete? Because it was really interesting. It set like a found count, something like that.
Yeah, didn't it find something like find the related records? Like if you have a 4 contacts for like sales or something, yeah. Because I remember there's like names in it, so it's like something like you yeah, I think I thought it was go to related record, but it's the same
something
sort of
like
thing,
that,
really.
right? So it would like go to the related.
So like in this, you could do go to related record. You've got some there, you've got some contacts or something, right?
Yeah, there's 106. Yeah. And then it would say like
they do about 4, but yeah.
I don't know if we have to go through all the details, but basically it's kind of like something you have to really think through, like carefully, to what it's going to do. Let's see, I want to see customer to see work order, probably using the work order layout.
Are they trying to get you to figure out like what would happen if there were no related records?
Yeah, something like that.
Do a GTR when there are no related records?
Yeah, that's another thing, right? That behavior changed at one point.
Yeah.
It used to show a found set of nothing, and now it shows a found set of whatever the found set was before you started. So I'm not sure. Yeah, that's actually just kind of a good thing to know, which we can kind of look at. But I think one of the other things was like it had some sort of a loop test, like if FC or like N is 0, then do this thing, delete a record, something like that. Wow, my keyboard typing skills are not good today. Delete record, no dialogue. And then have something that says set n to n minus 1. And then here it could say something like set the value of n to the found count. But then theoretically, it would go to all of these, loop through them. Oh yeah, if you're doing a delete, then you wouldn't do that. You would have an else. So deleting a record, if there's something that's true, or going to the next record if it's not, would be how you would do this. And this is another big gotcha. Question: has anyone ever in the history of using FileMaker used a go to next record and let this not be off? I don't think, I was thinking about it the other day. I think 100% of the time in my whole career that I've used go to record next, exit after laugh needs to be on. I just can't imagine. I don't know. Anyone have a use case for that?
We can use some counter or some condition to check whether if the count is greater than 0, then exit.
So you use
Exit,
it for
we can use exit loop.
Oh yeah, yeah. But that's different, right? So putting an exit loop, and then you actually put a go to record in there.
Mhm.
Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying?
Correct.
But I've usually seen it like both belt and braces. Like you do exit loop if
Yeah.
seen people do that quite often, and leave exit after last on, like they don't trust it, because you can do both. It doesn't hurt.
Yeah. Well, you can
I've
also
never wanted it off, and it defaults to off, doesn't it?
It does. Go to related defaults to off. And my question is, has
always
anyone
put it
ever
on.
left it off for any reason?
And has it ever caused you problems when you're testing a script and wondering why it doesn't complete?
Yeah, absolutely. If you forget to
It's
check
me
it,
loads of times.
it's endless loop. It gets to the last record and just keeps going.
Yeah, why isn't this working? Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I can imagine if maybe somebody wanted to make a second sweep or something like that, they'd have it start over again or jump somewhere else and continue the loop or something, but that'd be weird.
Yeah, but that's not what happens. It just stays there, doesn't it?
Oh no, but you could probably produce an error out of when it tries to go to the next record. It'll produce an error and you could tell it to go jump somewhere else if you wanted to.
Yeah. By the way, if it gets to the last record here, and it fails to go to the next one, which it will when it gets to the end of the set, it will create a log record on the server, because that's going to trigger as an error. And then you'll get a whole bunch of, like, if you've got a lot of scripts that do this, and I certainly do, you're going to get a whole bunch of useless lines in the server log that you don't want. So a lot of people.
So even if it's checked on, you get at least one of those errors then, right?
Right. So you can do, so some people, what they do is they do like a test, and they say, if we're at the last record, you know, like if get current record equals bound count, record number, maybe. If record number equals, not that, if record number equals get found count. Oh, this is good. Yeah, you guys are seeing it all happen. I think you can do a test like that. And if it's the case like this, and you can exit loop, you know.
Yeah,
And
so
then,
my imaginary use for this that I've never used is let's say you went into that if statement because you got to the very end and it's not sorted by creation order. You could say, well, you know what, let's just double check, because we've been going through a lot of these and somebody might have created a new record since we've been working on this. Go find to see if there's anything new and check those too. So yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's true.
But it would be nice if it just defaults to on instead of off.
That is definitely true. And I don't know why. I don't know what that wouldn't break any old behavior. It just would kind of be a little subtle improvement to the product. But I wonder if anyone has actually suggested that in the forums, or if we've all just sort of quietly put up with it for decades. Another gotcha question that they ask that I wanted to kind of talk about is one like this. They'll have like, close up all these folders.
Oh, wait. What was this gotcha then? What exactly was that?
So the gotcha on the one that we're looking at, now I lost that one. It's called test or something. New script, test script. This one. So kind of what we're trying to go for here, this script is certainly not a good test of what they actually do. It was basically, if you had some sort of a loop that went to another record and then there was no record there, or some other condition that there was a bug in your script. so that it didn't work like the way that it looked like it should work, then how many records would you have at the end, right? So like if I ran this script, I don't know, this code doesn't really make a lot of sense. I'm kind of curious. I have no idea what it will do to debug it really, but. So first of all, it makes a new record. Hey, here's our first problem. Now that it makes a new record, there are no related records. So C work order gives me an error because there's nothing at all.
Yeah.
So that's what that does. But if we take that silly line of code out, I don't know, I'm not really thinking this is a good example of that. But I would just say that there's a gotcha script related to if you ran this and there was a bug, and also for sure, if you ran it server side. Oh, you know, I'm remembering more now as we talk about it. They actually had a code in here that rather than doing a delete record, it actually ran a script that deleted a record server side. Right? Something like this.
Oh, wow.
Right? And so they had script A is this, and then script B is.
Yeah, that's complicated.
Yeah. Script B is delete. And like, if you ran this, we were sitting at a record that had a bunch of things like this one. And we ran it. So now it's go to related. Now it's looking at all the work orders. Should certainly have a go to first record thing. So n doesn't equal 0, but like if this actually ran, then the record that would get deleted would not be in this context, right? So if I let this run,
oh yeah,
it's not going to delete a work order record. So we have 1459. Now we have 1459. However, the default context now doesn't have a record, or it has one less record. Anyway, so that's one kind of gotcha thing that that will show, and you just basically have to know that when PSOS runs, it goes to the default context, right? It goes to whatever the default layout is here, and if there's a startup script that does something different before it stops, it goes to whatever default layout is there, and then it does its thing. So the startup script will finish.
And what if neither condition is true?
Pardon?
What if neither condition is true? So you have no go to this layout checkbox set in your file settings.
Yeah.
And no on open script, or your on open script does what yours does and exits immediately or whatever.
Yeah, FileMaker will always default to a layout when it opens. And it defaults to the layout that was the front layout, the main layout, when the file was in single user last. There's a bunch of other preferences like in FileMaker that work like that too. Global fields, whatever the value of global fields in single user, those things get committed. Also the window location, like if you put a window here and then you upload the file, it's gonna open there. Does that sound right? Is there something more to that, Alexi?
No, I was just pointing out that the default can be really mysterious if you
totally.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, it maybe with like, you know, I don't know if it's like the first layout, but yeah, it can definitely change based on when the file was in single user last. This is one of the reasons I almost never work with single user files.
So you put it up on a server even when you're just developing it and there's no.
Yeah, I basically make a brand new file. I do almost nothing. I set a couple of defaults that can only be set locally. Like I'm a big fan of showing text boundaries. So I always turn this on because this text will not be saved once the file is hosted. All of these checkboxes have to be set when the file is single user. And there's a couple of other things like that. So I turned those things on. I think this formatting bar, that has to be, pardon?
A list of the things that you set as a default for single user before you upload it, because that will be useful.
Yeah, it would be. And I don't think I've ever seen that. I just kind of remember them. Yeah, the contents of global fields, and most things are not like that, right? So they're actually getting less and less as it gets more mature. Well, it's pretty mature. More things are actually settable, and it'll remember it after the file is hosted. So now they have like file options for a lot of these things. Switch to layout, hide toolbars. Stuff like that is kind of settable. But yeah, I know all of these things are stored with the file. And many other things are actually stored with the instance of FileMaker. Like all of your menu, all of these things here, these are not stored with the database file. These are stored with your copy of FileMaker. Everything that's in Data Viewer, these are all stored with your copy of FileMaker. Not with the file. So yeah, there's really not that much that's file go with the file. Anybody else think of any examples of file-based settings?
Well, I know the what was it? If you show the bars on top or not, right? You have to set that before you upload the file.
Yeah. So you mean like the grid and the grid spacing and the
status bar, the format bar.
These?
Yeah, that one too. And the format bar and the status bar, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you mean this. So.
Yes.
Yeah. And the formatting bar, which I thought there was a keyboard shortcut for it. And I think
some fields too. So if you have them in creation order versus alpha order.
No, those actually remember now. So like if you go to the graph and you go to a table and you change it to custom order, that gets saved in multi-user. So when I close this file, it'll save it. If I come back in and change it to alpha, like a heathen, because who would ever use that? I have a lot of stupid editorializing in these things, so just ignore me. Then, yeah, those definitely do get saved with the multi-user file now. I don't know, just briefly, I'm kind of a fan of custom order because it allows me to have address, city, state, zip together. And then it allows me to take the fields that I think are kind of unimportant or maybe going to be deleted and move them down to the bottom. And to kind of have all my keys. So if I make a key, foreign key after the fact, I can stick it next to, move it up to the top. I just really like the control. I sort of put them in priority order, if you will. Calculations and summaries at the bottom. And important data goes up top. Yeah.
Don't like about the custom order and it getting shifted around potentially is that if you go to the relationship graph, it scrambles your lines sometimes. Like I don't know, I kind of like my lines not to cross. And so if I just keep them all in alpha, generally the new fields and things like that won't like surprise me all of a sudden.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. If I change it in customer to alpha, and then I go to the graph, this does cross lines now because C is before I. And then if I go back and change it, it will go back to, it does remember your custom order, but here's I don't know, this is trivia time. If someone goes to creation order and they change one thing,
oh yeah,
then it will create a new custom order and it'll blow away whatever custom order was there before. And there's nothing you can do about it. So if you're someone like me who really relies on custom order, and you work with other developers, you're gonna have a broken heart from time to time, because alpha order really makes a lot more sense to most people. I'm just weird.
And there's other places that the this order shows up within the system, right? I forget where
Oh,
else.
yeah, I don't think so. Like here, maybe it does. I choose like
Yes.
customer. Yeah.
What
Those
would
are
you
all in
have
that order.
right now?
These
Yeah.
are in this order, and I think, can you change the order here? Yeah, you can change it
Oh, yeah,
here,
that's nice. Yeah.
which probably doesn't change it in the graph. It does. That's interesting.
Like what? It did?
Yes, if I change it, I just change this to, I'll change it right now to field name order. And if I go to here for customer, it's now in field name order. And if I change this back to custom.
Yeah, so that's what I don't like about the custom. It's just too brittle. It's like people can surprise you too many ways.
Yep, definitely.
And then when you do the little bit of type ahead to jump down to a field name, if it's alpha, then you kind of right words. The next thing's going to be.
Yep. There's no right answer to it, except most likely it's alpha, right, and I'm wrong.
No, but so I jump in because I find I'm working on a big system at the moment. It's custom order. I didn't build it. It's legacy system, and that's fine. The custom order is quite well done. But if I'm trying to find a field and I don't know that what the custom order is, you just switch to alpha, and I can find the field I'm looking for.
And then just change it back. Yeah. Or if you just change it, you can change it from alpha to custom and just know not to reset a custom, and you're good to go. You can, that works perfectly well.
Yeah, that I didn't know. That's really interesting, Matt. I didn't know that, so I'm going to be careful.
Yeah, you do have to be careful.
I'm an alpha male.
Good one. I love little puns like that. I usually make a custom theme called Apex Predator, just because Apex Blue, it's just, I don't know, it's a stupid pun. The other kind of gotcha script that I can remember that they talk about, which I want to show, is this one. They'll have something that says, it'll have like show custom dialog, and it will say like, pick the color. And then the choices will be, like blue, green, red, something like that, right? And then the code will say, let's see, result. That's script result. That's not what I want. What's the command again?
Last message choice.
Pardon?
Get last message choice.
Yeah. See the things that jump out of my brain. So get last message choice. And then you can have, if your code says, if, let's just call this choice. And you could say like, if choice equals green, then show custom dialog. Or like, and then else if, I wish there's got to be someday a brain interface that you can not have to think and type, and just whatever you think in your brain just goes straight to the screen. Else if choice equals 2, right, which is how it would actually work, because these results are 1, 2, and 3. There is no 0, and it doesn't tell you here what the numbers are. You just have to kind of know that if you choose the second button, it's going to be, the result will be the number 2, an integer. If choice equals 2, then beep. Else if choice equals, I don't know, some other thing. They give you some other weird example. You know, another thing, 0. And so they'll say something, the question will be, if the user chooses choice 1, what will be the result of the script? And another question will be, let's see, here's another example. So they'll say like, under what circumstances would the delete record request be called? Which in this case it would, right? There's weird cases. But another thing that would be like, under what circumstances would this one be called? I don't know. You know, what case would it set the field? Like that, right? So there's no circumstances where if you run this script, this code would ever get called because there is no choice 0. Also, there's no circumstances where this would be called because it's not 1, 2, or 3. So if you clicked, like if you ran this script and you chose the first or the third button, this is what would happen. Right? For newer people, this might be new. What is going on menu load? Okay, well, no. It ran some other code that I didn't want it to do. Right, so pick the result. If you choose blue, which is 1, and so I actually probably should say, yeah, choice is showing up here, right? That's 1. And so choice does not equal green, so that's false. Choice does not equal 2, so that's false. Choice does not equal 0, so that's false, so it's going to say you are here. If, however, I ran this and chose 2, green, that's the, oh yeah, choice 2. So this is interesting. Now it's going to beep, right? This code gets executed. But I didn't hear a beep. That's probably because Zoom probably just turns that stuff off. All right, that makes sense. Everybody kind of get this type of question, because this one like this is usually on there.
Yeah, and like you say, it's really important for people
Everybody
to realize that button 1 is the third button on the right if you have 3 buttons, right? It's not the first button.
My audio glitch out again.
Oh, hello, Matt.
Yeah, Matt, are you not hearing us? I'll tell him in the chat.
I think my audio did glitch out.
Thanks,
I can't
Alex.
hear anything.
You know what I mean? It's for new people, it's confusing.
Can someone try talking? See if I can hear.
Hey, Matt, how you doing? Nope.
1, 2, 3 test. 1, 2, 3.
No.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, you're talking, but I don't hear it. Well, that's great. I had a problem. Oh yeah, you're talking, Ward.
Well, can you hear me? 1, 2, 3.
Now I can.
Oh, maybe it's time for commercial interruption.
You know what I think it was? I think the beep command messed with my audio. Because all I had to do was turn the volume up and it just kind of went back to the way it was.
Oh.
Two days ago, I had a, so first of all, I apologize if I was talking on top of people. That's not good. I had a problem with a huge amount of packet loss on audio. And even though I have a lot of bandwidth, for some reason, audio wasn't coming down. So I did a whole bunch of network reconfiguration to fix that. Okay, what did I miss there from people's questions?
We just did a bunch of test 1, 2, 3 sort of things. Nothing exciting.
Hey, Matt.
Yes.
On the delete records in a list, the thing that, so suppose you have a list of records and there's a couple that are marked like status old, right? You want to delete the old ones and you loop through it. When you delete the one, you end up on the next record. And so you might skip a record.
Yes.
And I wonder if that was a question at the exams. Because that's something I always struggle with. So I usually do it backwards and start from the bottom record and then work my way up. And that works easier.
Yeah. There's a couple of sort things that will break there that definitely will be an issue. Let's see, I'm looking at some other stuff in chat here too. Let's take a quick look at that, if you guys don't mind nerding out. So let's say you had a script that you wanted to delete all the records here that were older than, that were in 2017 or earlier, because you didn't care about them. And so you had a script that says delete old ones. And it went to work order using work order list in a new window, only related, and then did a loop. Went to the first record, and then it said if the date is less than, let's do it this way. If the year of the date is less than 2018, then delete record with no dialogue.
Yes.
And then you'd have to have an exit loop if get man count equals 0. Right, and also you'd have to have an else, go to record next. So this would be the normal way you would do that, right? But this is going to work differently, like just like you said, if there's a sort. So if I were to run this, so now I'm in these records, and they're in, there's probably just, they're all in 2017. So there's just going to be a bunch of records that'll be deleted. But if I were to sort this a weird way, like by hours, so then I have some 2017s and some 2018s. I wonder, oh, let's put that sort in here. Hours. There's also this choice in the script of this one here is the gotcha. The keep records in sorted order. If you're deleting something that affects the sort, or if you sort them by random or something like that, it's going to jump all over the place. So I think that's kind of what you're hinting at. I think in this case, it's going to work somewhat predictably, but there's some times it for sure would not work predictably. Yeah, this looks pretty straight, right? It's not.
Well, do we go to records request page exit after last should be on, right?
Oh, yeah, this would certainly fail. I would, it would just spin at the end. But when I'm trying to see if there's one from 2018, but there's weirdly none, like my sort did not seem to work. I guess it is, but no, it's not sorted by hours at all. 12, 10, 9, that is not sorted. That's very odd. But
Is that a text field or?
yeah, maybe? No?
It is a
No?
data type is.
Let me try sorting it by something else. Anyway, this is a whole different problem, right? So here's sort by date, that seems to work. Sort by hours. Now that seems to work. So that was a really strange glitch, for sure. Oh, there's actually another one that really is related to this, and it's not delete, but new record or duplicate.
It's duplicate. You
Yeah.
have to start at the bottom and go up, like somebody was saying.
No, there's another way though. Well, I don't know, maybe there's multiple ways. So if you don't sort it, well, let's just run this kind of bit by bit, right? So if this is in unsorted order, and I'm on the record 1, and I run the script to duplicate, the new record will be the very bottom, right? But if I were to sort the records by ID and not keep them in sorted order, and I run the exact same script, what's going to happen is the duplicated record will appear directly below the one that I'm on. So the sort makes a huge difference if you're looping through records to do a duplicate. So this does work. Otherwise, like Alexi said, you can actually go backwards. You can go to the record previous instead of record next. And also thank you for pointing out that it needs to be on. Wrong table occurrence in the sort script step. Oh, that might be it. Oh, it totally is. Yeah, the reason my sort did not work is because I did it from CWO, not from. Oh, actually, I know what it is. I sorted from WO context, and this is in, wait. This is not WO, it's CWO, which is when I do a real database, I never ever base a layout on anything except the anchor of a TOG. But in the Claris supplied demo database, because it's really small and because this is being recorded, so I won't make a comment, that they actually based it on this TO. So I don't know why you would ever anchor, but they did anyway, so it doesn't matter. +1 to the anchor TO concept. Chris likes that. All right. I don't want to be sharing my screen the whole time. Other people come up with some stuff.
On the same topic, different topic, any topic?
Any topic. Script security, deployment, data integration. Those are kind of the 4 things, or I think calculations are pretty big too, if you want to go back to that. Something fun to talk about, trivia, going to be on the test, or best practice. Let's just limit it to those very large group of things. If Chris Ippolite is on here, why are you silent?
He's lurking in the chat.
Yeah, just like an elf. elf on the shelf over there.
I love the elf on the shelf title. I'll take that for today.
You comment on that and you won't break up any tech FileMaker goodness.
Well, I was trying to embellish on the chat, but here to listen and chat.
Someone said no.
So we haven't talked much about security. Maybe we could move on to.
We could do that.
I don't know. I mean, maybe, I don't know. There's probably a lot in scripting we haven't talked about, but what would
Yeah,
those-
there's one gotcha question they sometimes ask. I think they ask like, which of these is a valid way to send a parameter into a script? 1, with a button, 2, with a trigger on first window open, 3, by holding down the Option key and choosing a script from the script workspace menu, and 4, from a perform script on server. Like, I always hate that question because I really, really wish that you could hold down the Option key and run a script with a parameter, but you can't. The other ones are valid. I'm actually trying to think of any way that you could call a script and that you can't send a parameter into it. I can't think of any.
There better not be one.
On open. On first window open.
Yeah, that you can send a parameter to it then. Pretty sure.
Really?
On first window open?
Maybe you're right.
That's actually one of the gotchas on the exam.
Yeah, because the
There's
script
no
can
session.
accept it, but you can't give it.
Yeah, there's no session.
Interesting. That totally makes sense upon reflection. And that's good to know that that's a gotcha. Yep, there is no option on that one. In fact, I would bet you that most script triggers, probably no script triggers have a parameter, do they?
They do.
Oh yeah, of course, all the objects ones would have to, right? On the layout, they all do. But on, let's see, what about, so on, in other words, on a layout, when you have a field and you do on object save, of course, there's a trigger there because I use it for logging all day, every day. But, oh, on record load, record commit, all those ones have triggers, but all the file specific ones, none of those do. Yeah, I'm looking at them right now.
So you're gonna have to fix that.
So all of these don't, there's no dialog box down there for it.
I
Any
mean,
other
why would
places?
the parameter make sense there? Because it would always,
You're right.
the parameter would always be in effect
Mhm.
or never. So
Yeah, you basically the script will be dedicated, right? So you don't. It doesn't need to have some special thing if it's such a special feature of like a, I don't know, on window open actually maybe should. It could be like, what's the window name? But this is also
Yeah.
you know, at the database level, it's not like.
And not to mention, you could have like a global variable that you're setting, and then you want to be able to respond to that.
Yeah. But
Well,
so you
I
certainly
put that in the script, but you know.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That's a good gotcha. Thanks for that, Chris. Alexia, I think you're about to have an idea. And then also see in
well,
chat.
I was just thinking about what I just said, like,
Why would you?
because someone said, oh, they need to fix that. And I'm thinking, really? Like, I don't think so. Because I mean, even if declare a global variable, it's not declared until the script is running. So then you respond to it like why would it be helpful to have a parameter there? I'm just.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I never thought about it until now that that those ones don't have the option or a parameter. It just runs the script. So I would submit that it doesn't need that feature.
Can I ask a security question?
Yes, please. And actually, I think that's kind of the next thing we're going to go to.
So you can authenticate, with just the FileMaker within FileMaker, but also with external servers, and against LDAP, right? And LDAP you can have groups, but in external servers such as Google, you can't have groups, right? You have to enter individual people as email addresses, like in Google. I don't know about the other ones, but is there a way to group people so you have, directors and managers?
Let's see. When a user is authenticated through Active Directory, which is the one that I mainly have worked with, when the user comes in, you get a return separated list of all of the groups they're in, and then you can compare that list to a group that you have. So you get their file name. I'm trying to remember exactly what you guys. It's been a while since I looked at that. And I think you're right. Like some of the other authentications like Google, I don't think you get that. It just, and if you have a Google authenticated user, you have to have an account with that email address. And at that point, you put that account into a privilege set, because each user can only be in one privilege set. With Active Directory, you actually don't create an account for every user who's authenticated. They get authenticated from Active Directory, and then it passes the information in. So I think that might be a difference in how those two things work.
You cannot import a user list either, right? So I have 60 users. I have to, for each app, I have to enter them manually by hand.
No, there's a way to do that. There's just there's a few script steps that actually support accounts fields. You can create accounts, you can change privilege sets, you can change passwords, and of course, in this case, I wouldn't have a password. I think you can delete accounts. You cannot do anything to a full access account. In other words, you cannot create or delete a full access account with the script step.
Right. So I can do wordbaumann@gmail.com. I can add it as a user, but then I can't assign it to Google authentication.
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. Yeah, it looks like I see Azure has groups and custom OAuth. I see some FileMaker Go questions too. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure on that one. And
thank you.
I'm also, it's going to sort of change because with Claris Pro, if and when we get to that point, none of those things work, because the only authentication in Claris Pro is the Claris ID. So at the moment, it does not support any other, including traditional FileMaker authentication.
By the way, Matt, I thought this was interesting. Before you convert your files to .claris, you should make sure you don't have any Claris IDs already assigned. Like actually go through and delete them, because once you convert to .claris, we ran into a problem where we couldn't now add somebody as a user using their Claris ID once it was a .claris file, because, well, ultimately we found out that once we dug around the pre-converted file, they already were assigned. It's weird. It seems like maybe it's just a bug or something, but I would say converting from .fmp12 to .claris isn't just the open it up in the new app. You actually should spend some time in security, cleaning some Claris IDs out, and probably be, making note of, all the user accounts and what they can do and everything, because you're going to have to go, remap all that logic the best you can, at least inside Claris. And right now there's not really a one-to-one map for that type of functionality.
Yep. Stuff gets blown away for sure. It's quite different how it works. I actually did a conversion today, and all of my themes got borked. So every object on every layout was generic. and the log said nothing was wrong. So I don't really know how that happened. So I don't know.
Sometimes that does work, or
oh yeah, I've never seen that problem before. I've converted not a ton of files, but I've converted a bunch of files from FileMaker 19 to Claris Pro 40. And I've never seen this problem until today. But I'm definitely digging Claris Pro. Let's go back to the FileMaker Go. There probably are going to be some FileMaker Go and WebDirect questions in terms of like some of the capabilities that they have. For example, FileMaker Go has a script step to directly import from the camera. It's called insert from device. And you can target the front or the back camera at a specific image size, full size, large, medium, or small, which is pretty cool. You can also target a barcode or some of the other options that you can do, like a scanner to scan a barcode specifically. You can target the signature to capture a signature rather than take a photo. And those are totally unique to iOS, of course. And then Latin long and beacons, range beacons. So those are things that you can only do on FileMaker Go. And then Go and WebDirect, neither one has a design layer. No layout mode and no preview mode.
There's a few others on gesture tap, right? Like, aren't there?
That's right. You do have some other things on gesture tap. You have some AV player things. Oh, FileMaker Go supports animation. So all the time you see this animation thing pop up when you're scripting, like go to layout and it says, oh, what do you want to do? Swipe from left? And you really think that those are going to work on the Mac. This is a trivia question I often ask. They don't work on a Mac or Windows. They work only on FileMaker Go.
Yeah, I thought the plan was that they would eventually, but I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, eventually. Someday. It would be cool. I love that because you sort of have if a solution has 8 screens, you can have a mental map. Like the menu is in top left. And then if you swipe to the right or swipe left or up and down, you can kind of have a map of what layouts where. And so if you get that visual cue of like, oh, we went to the left, now that's where I am now versus to the right. Yeah, I think that's a really good way to make things easier for your users that you don't get FileMaker Go and Pro. Oh, sorry, that you don't get a FileMaker Pro Mac or PC. The other question about, yeah, or WebDirect. 1-to-1 to start the Breathe app on Watch, and I have no idea to do that. I don't know if I do either. Like if you have a, I don't know, maybe AppleScript, but probably not. Chris, aren't there some ways to do?
Yeah, that's got to be in actually in the SDK. Like you do have access to some kits. I don't want to pretend I've connected to HealthKit before. Actually, I know Molly Connolly has had some success with a product she's working on connecting to the HealthKit. So I know at least it's possible, but those type of kit connections happen on the SDK publishing side. So that might be, I would assume that's probably, Joe, where you've already looked, but that's where I'd be looking to figure out how to connect those into my FileMaker app.
There's also the Siri connections, right? You can like grant a script the privilege to be called by Siri. Donate.
Yeah, they call it donating, and so that's the Shortcuts app, and you can use Siri as a trigger. So that might also, that could also be an interesting way to use voice at least to trigger that.
Yeah, I haven't really played with that, which is embarrassing.
I gotta say it's really easy. I played around with it a bit for some like FileMaker 19 new feature videos, and it was super easy to do. You literally just donate the app. The gotcha there is before it's available to Shortcuts, you have to open the file first on your iOS device, and then it shows up as available. That script will show up as available inside Shortcuts. The only thing about that is like sharing those shortcuts. So like if you're doing this for a customer deployment, I was all excited about something, and then I tried to share it with all the users so that they could, use the voice. And it's totally possible, but they have to like accept some weird like, iOS sandbox setting where it's like they have to go change their setting to allow someone to send a shortcut over to their OS and accept it. So with some instruction, it's possible, but shortcuts might be an interesting way to look at that as well.
More stuff to play with. Are there any core ML questions on the test?
No, nor SDK questions, nor shortcuts, nor any of the fun stuff, really. But I guess that's good, right?
Yeah.
Nor JavaScript. There's maybe if you just commit to memory the name of the script and corresponding JavaScript function that were introduced in 19, that'll be the extent of it. So no need to worry out on the fringes there.
Yeah, there will be questions on while and custom functions. And
there is one on while.
Yeah,
that's probably worth taking a look at the structure of while, because that'll get folks at least one question correct on the example.
Yeah. But if you're not super familiar with it, you could also spend 10 minutes puzzling it out.
Probably worthwhile.
Yeah, it could be. Oh, I see what you did there.
Or a good homework assignment.
That's true too.
Yeah.
Recursion is important. We talked about it 2 days ago, but I just think recursion is much better done in a script where you can actually test it and see it. But it certainly would be faster in while or custom function. Having an ADHD brain is sometimes interesting. A minute ago, someone said something about security. Immediately after, somebody said something about a global variable. And I made a connection that there's one really subtle and weird thing. Let's just kind of dive into security for a second. And then we'll cover a bunch of things along the way of this weird, you won't believe what FileMaker does with security. Manage, Securitate, Advanced. Oh, one of my favorite things about this is how many layers down the rabbit hole it is. It is a lot of layers deep. Okay, so if you have a custom privilege on a privilege set, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers deep, all 5 modal dialog boxes, click anything else. And you have a test that says for a given table, like the customer table, you can only view records if a certain thing is true, 6 layers deep. And you want to say, you can only do this one if the user ID is, Bob or something like that. And so like if you when you log in, you set a global variable that says administrator, and then you do some sort of a test that says, if set equals administrator. Something like that, which just seems totally reasonable, right? Who suspects this is going to work? Chris, Alexei, do either one of you know for sure about this one?
Well, yeah, I don't know if you're circling the wagons on this, but one of my favorite, like super easy things to do in this exact window is offer dynamic editing, deleting, whatever, CRUD you're looking for there, by just simply doing the global account name equals get account name, which means anyone who created a record can delete it, and then anyone who edited or created a record can edit it or whatever. It's a super easy thing to do that doesn't require a lot of hard coding and logic based on usernames.
I totally agree. So first of all, on this one, this will not work. So everywhere else in FileMaker that you have a script that runs, and you set a global variable upon login, on OpenScript, this will get set and it will be seen, but it does not work in the security at all. This has to be a global field. So if you have like a dashboard global field like device ID or whatever, or like what you said, if let's just presume that this one is actually the privilege set equals or account name.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It wouldn't even be actually, yeah, the even easier part is now FileMaker creates those for us as part of a default field. So you would just use the default field for a creation account and then equals get account name, right? And
Oh, yeah.
you know.
Oh, that's right. Like you could just look at the record and customer, right? So
yeah.
Oh, a warning about not using those global variables would be nice.
it would be. I actually made the same mistake twice, years apart, and I tried so many things to make it work, and then I finally remembered, oh yeah, that's right. Global variables don't work here. You have to use global fields.
Can you use calculations? Can you use calculation fields?
Absolutely. Yeah, and you can use any other type of field in here. The more you do, the more distant the calculation is, and the more complex you make the security, it'll vastly slow down access to the database. So like we have a medical database that record viewing in a key table can only be set based on that a user is in that has access to certain types of records. Like in this particular case, it's for cases of a disease. And so if you can see records in one type of a disease, but not another one, then it'll show it. And every given user has a return separated list of which disease types they can see. And then it has to compare that against one record. Okay, Chris has to go. Thanks you. Thanks for hanging out, Chris. So those kind of things really, really killed the security until we made it very efficient for how it was doing it.
How did you make it more efficient?
We had to compare it to global fields that were in the same table as the field, so it didn't have to look outside of where it was at all. So like G, field equals this, or like a really, really simple function like pattern count of the group had this in it, something very straightforward, no relationship. It didn't have to look to some other place. And that made a huge difference in the speed.
So, speaking of pattern count, I started using position more, just because I assume that pattern count would just keep on looking when it doesn't need to, where position will stop after the first one.
Yeah, that's true. It finds the first. There's been some discussion on that. I don't remember. I bet you're right. Yeah, there's some other functions that you can use too, right? There's like not list of, but value count, maybe unique values. There was one we talked about 2 days ago about finding a value in a list, but I can't remember what it is now.
Yeah. What about the cost of using it?
Yeah, like it would just be a little bit more, it would just be faster. Mine have actually been filter values. No, that's probably not it. I bet you're right. I bet it's like, I bet it's, would you say position?
Yeah.
What you use?
You can tell the jump, in other cases too, if you're looking for something that's not necessarily right at the beginning, you can have it jump a few before it actually starts searching.
Yeah. And I bet with JSON, it's probably pretty slow too. Like if you set it up as a JSON array and did something. Yeah, I don't know. There's definitely a lot of small, subtle security things. Backing up a little bit on this, right? So we went a bunch of layers deep in security. I think some of the things they're going to ask are, what is actually possible to do? Like what can you control security on? Maybe we'll back up even further. One, FileMaker will make 2 accounts. Actually, it makes one full access account and then a guest account. And you can't have a file with no full access account. So if I deleted everybody else, I would not be able to delete that one. And also you cannot delete the guest account, nor can you rename it. So that's a little fact that you kind of need to know. Second, it will make 3 privilege sets, which you cannot rename or configure. So there's a little bit of configuration, but none of this stuff. Like, so the whole main areas can't be configured. All you can do is you can say the extended privileges, what platform can you get in? For example, your full access privilege set, you should never, under any circumstances, allow WebDirect to gain access to a full access privilege set, in my opinion, because then you're opening up to the world of the web. Everyone in the world has a web browser, has the potential to try to log into your database. And if they guess the right username and password, they'll have full access to the WebDirect side of it, which means now they have the username and password to then log in with FileMaker, and then they can do whatever they want. So to reduce the surface of hackability, I recommend that you never allow WebDirect users to get in with full access. I wish you can control FileMaker Go, but you can't. So FileMaker Go and Pro are both controlled under just FileMaker Network app. And then the other thing I would recommend is if you have something that uses any of these other methods, like a ODBC, PHP, data API, that these ones, that you have a special account name that only is in that extended privilege, and that you don't use a full access account to log on to those things, even though it's easier. It just kind of opens, again, as your sort of exposure. If someone were to get the credentials of how you log on to data API, they would then, and it was full access, they would then be able to use that, and you wouldn't know, because it would just be, they'd be getting in and doing things. So principle of least privilege, every account you make, every privilege set you make, have the least amount of control as possible. So full access is you can't configure it, is basically every single thing, all data, all design. There's data entry only, also not configurable. It allows read, write, delete in everything. And read only is not configurable. It is just read only in everything. These two are useless because you pretty much, if you have a log system, there's always going to be a point that you're going to want a user to either be able to not edit certain records in a certain table, or to have read-only access everywhere except a log table where they should be able to change data, or like one field in one place where they need to be able to edit it. I've not yet in my career encountered a place where the exact privileges for these two actually works. So what I do instead is I start with one of them that's close and I duplicate it. And then I get a really good close set of what I want. And I can call this test set. And then this gives you all the choices already. It's read only, and you can say, yes, it's read only, except they can make log records. They can't delete them. They can edit notes. And that's it, right? Recent records. So if they view a record, you want to be able to see that. So something like this would be a very realistic and very simple security change.
Tell me if this is a bad idea, but I do have this one file where I decided to put all the tables, all sorts of reference tables that are, they don't have any, there's no security on them. I mean, anybody could read them. It wouldn't matter because they're like public information, like state names and zip
I have a
code.
lot of those. Yeah,
And then
static tables.
I just make that one file just read only for everybody. So everybody when that file gets opened up as the reference file, anybody can read it. And if anybody wants to edit it for some reason, they have to log in with an account. So I think it's logging in default with guest or something like that. And it's just to simplify the security and all those. Think about who has access to it. It's like everybody in the entire Active Directory can essentially read it.
I like that. Hey, you can't edit it, but you can see it. That's perfectly good.
Eric, you said file. Do you mean table or file? You said file.
The whole file with all the tables that no one, everyone should be able to see. Like it wouldn't matter if somebody on the internet saw it. It's fine. It's just I leave it wide open to read.
Yeah, I like that.
Hey, Matt, when you use that security feature and you have like a field that the user doesn't have access to, and it's on a layout, it shows kind of nasty, right? Because it says no, not accessible or something. But
yeah, that's a good question. So if you
can you test for that?
Let's see. Do you want to talk about that for a second? Because I have an idea. I have a workaround for it.
Well, so you have you say social security number, right?
Oh, okay. You're talking about something different than I thought.
So you have a field of social security number, and only the managers have access to it, but not the the employees. Then it shows field not accessible, right?
Right.
But ideally in the layout, I would say well, if a field is not accessible, don't show this field.
Yeah. Well, there's 2 or 3 things we could talk about on that. So let's say we have a social security number in this customer table. And we're going to put it in the security layer. Actually, I'm going to start with one thing before I even get to this. If you have a social security number field, where is that field? Oh, that's interesting. Oh, it's got the wrong style on it. It needs to have an edit. And be editable. So if you have a social security number on here, right, so something like that, and you don't want a user to be able to see it, the first thing you should do is you can actually have a mask on it. That's kind of like a value list. You can make a concealed edit box. And then if you do that, it just shows dots. You cannot copy and paste out of it. So if I try to copy to the clipboard and paste somewhere, it doesn't actually have that value. A script, I believe, can actually copy and paste out of it, but users cannot. And so you can't see it. However, you can do a test and you could have like a special reveal script that can show you the value if you want to see it. So that's one way to do it. You're talking about something further, though. You're talking about at the security layer where you would have a privilege set that in the customer area, you would have a view limit and you would say, that's not what I want, field access limit. The SSN field has no access. And in this case, it would show up on the layout as no access right on top of it, which I can't easily show. And that's not good. So one of the ways to fix that is with conditional hide object when. You can say if get account privilege set name. If account privilege set name equals test, then just don't show it. Something like that would actually just make it straight up invisible.
But it's basically the same test that you did before in the account.
Run that by me again.
That's basically the same test you did before in account settings, right?
Yes, yeah, it's the same. It's looking at the actual real security as opposed to something else like that. But yeah, that would be another way to do it.
And the question I have around here, if you do this, the hiding of a field in WebDirect, is it actually in the HTML?
I don't believe so. That's a good question. Wow.
Does anybody know?
I bet Wim DeCourt knows, but he's not on the call.
What's the question again?
If you use the hide, if you use the this function, hide object when, and the layout is on WebDirect, is it actually in the HTML but invisible, or is it not in the HTML? Like it should certainly not be in the HTML if it's really properly secure. I would bet you it's not there.
Except that security by obscurity is not properly secured anyway, so.
Yeah, you're just trying to keep people from looking at it and taking photos and things like that, I think, right?
Yeah. Well,
but if you do it on the FileMaker security level, then the data is definitely not being served, right?
That's absolutely true. Yes. Yeah. The only real security is in here. That's for sure. Having a script after the user logs on and set what's typically called faux security, secondary security, is definitely much less secure, or maybe not secure at all, depending on how you do it. I usually call it like coarse grain and fine grain. So coarse grain security would be like the first, anyone who's in this class, an administrator, can read, write, and change these particular tables, these particular fields. But then you have some other things that are really go to the user preference, because they may have checkboxes for 5 or 6 different things that they might be able to do within the department, which would then subtly change which layouts, which reports, which scripts, which whatever they can run. And it's not the end of the world if they do one of the other things, but controlling that and having like 40 or 50 privilege sets would be a pain. I would say well, I certainly would do it if I was the programmer, to have real security at one layer, and then the smaller stuff, I would have a user table. And then when the user logs on, I would authenticate them to that table. And then I would read all of their smaller preferences, which could be default things, as well as like settings on their dashboard of what they usually like to see. They like to see things sorted by name or not instead of by date, stuff like that. That's typically what I would do. Definitely not stuff that's on the test.
And related to this, if you set things into FileMaker security and you run a script with full access, we
didn't get to that. Right? We didn't get to that. Enable grant full access privileges. And here's that short destination thing Chris was talking about. So if you do that, then this script can run with full access, even though the user doesn't have it, which means it can do things like delete records or truncate table or whatever that the user could normally not do. I think I cut you off. What your question was about that.
Well, can you have access to another template that the user normally doesn't have access to?
Can you have access to a different template?
Yeah, so a user doesn't have access to a specific template. Does he have access to it now and read-write privileges through that script?
Yeah, this would certainly give them ability to do things that their privilege set does not allow them to do.
Yeah, like create accounts.
Yeah, this checkbox for sure overrides the other security. A good example of that is, let's say you have a security step and security and the work order table. Let's go with our test set again. And you say, the only way they can edit a record is if the work order date is within the last 7 days, right? Or maybe if the work order date equals today. So if date equals today, right? Work orders date equals get current date. What's wrong with that? Oh, unrelated table. Oh, because it's work order date. I don't see what I did wrong. Oh, dashboard. I'm confused now. I think I went too fast. Oh, I'm in the dashboard table, of course. Okay, in the work order field, they can only edit a record if the work order date was today's date, right? And so if the user went in and they created a record, by the way, you'd also need to do one other thing in here. You for sure need to do that for this to be valid, because when a new work order gets created, it's going to have no date. And then, or maybe it'll have no date for a brief second, and then the script will set a date. Or they could type in today's date. So to finish my thought, in a situation like this, a user could go in and they could edit a work order and put in today's date in here and then start adding line items to it. And then make an error or do something where they say, oh, this wasn't for today, this was for yesterday. And then now they've locked themselves out of the record, right? So if you make a security based on a value in the record, which is a good way to do it, and allow the user to also modify that field, then they can actually lock themselves out of a record and then have no way to get back in. So what you could do in a situation like this is have a little sort of a break glass button or something that allows them to change the date back to today, for example, so that they can edit the record more. And then if they click that, it would make like a log entry and do some special stuff. Anyway, so that's kind of my thought on that.
Back to what you were talking about, where you like, whether or not somebody has access to read certain records, that could like really slow down the performance of viewing a layout. That's not you wouldn't get that same effect for like editing a record, right? They could at least, it would view just as well as ever, right? But
Yeah,
writing would have a slight.
Once you're on a record, there will be no hit at all for performance. But if you have 100,000 records in the database and a complex security test to tell whether or not you can view any record, now you're talking about some performance hit.
Okay, so viewing is the big one. And then as far as like being able to modify, what if somebody were to do an import? Would that be take a huge hit on that? If you were like importing 10,000 records and it was maybe it would do the test on every.
I bet.
Oh no, I guess go ahead. No. I guess the mod.
I think it would do it like if you imported a bunch of records such that some of the records you could see and some other records you couldn't after they were imported.
What I'm saying is, like, let's say you're importing into an existing table and into existing records, like you're doing an up.
Import update.
Yeah, that would take a huge hit then, right? For
probably, yeah.
Okay.
But a straight import probably wouldn't, because it would just probably import things quickly, and then do the security test to say, oh yeah, you imported all these records, but some of them you can't see because of whatever reason. In other words, like if you imported records in a work order table, and you had something that said you can only view a work order from the last year, and some of them were old, then you'd import a record, you'd be able to create a record in the table. It would allow you to do that if you have the create privilege. But then as soon as the record is committed, now you can't edit it. So there's sort of that very brief moment where you can, if you have the checkbox checked to create a record in a table, you can create it and set all the fields to whatever you want. And then as soon as it's committed, I think I'm saying the exact same thing twice. At that point, the security test runs. Back to the transaction thing too, a little bit. Oh yeah, I see some more comments about converting old files. You can sometimes end up with a file without full access account. There's even a function in the tools to be able to remove a full access account. It's like if you're going to distribute a file and you don't want anyone to be able to try to hack it or use a password utility to hack it, that does allow you to do that. One of the things I wanted to talk about in security was the most important aspect of security in FileMaker, which is encryption at rest. So my little soapbox on this one is this. The biggest sort of risk exposure surface, if you will, attack surface in a FileMaker database is if someone has physical copy of the file. And if you think about the life of a database, it's going to be on your desktop when you create it. You're going to take backups of it off. It's going to be on some other drive somewhere. It's going to be on the server itself. It's going to be in backups of all the server. The file is going to be sort of spread around over the years. And every one of those copies can be looked at by a, they can be run through a utility that can hack into the file, because there's a utility that can do that for PDF files and spreadsheets and FileMaker databases and tons of other things that are not properly encrypted. Also, you can just look at the hex of a file. You can just kind of directly read into it. Open a database in a text utility and do a search. And some of the text, the really sensitive data in a file is actually searchable in text in the database. So there's some exposure, let alone the intellectual property of all the structure. So encryption at rest solves that completely. It encrypts the file when it's closed. So if the file is hosted on the server and open, then the users can get in and work with it normally. But if once it's encrypted, it requires the secondary very long password. It should be a very long password to even open the file before you can authenticate with your username and password. So it's absolutely critical on any database that has confidential information. Okay, so that's part one. Part two, if you lose the encryption password, no one can help you. Not the NSA, not Claris. You're done. You'll never, ever be able to get into that file again. So once you encrypt a file, make sure you have that password in a really good, secure place. Print it, stick it in an envelope. Because once you encrypt it and host it on a server, you're never going to need that password again until you update the server, move to a different server, take a backup of the file and look at it. It's going to sort of just be there, and then you won't think about it for a year. At which point, if you upgrade to a different server and you don't have the password, you will have completely lost all the years worth of work. This happened to a client, so I'm not just making it up.
So if you restart a server, you don't need the password.
If what?
If one restarts the server, reboot it, you didn't move it, right?
Yeah.
There's a power outage or something, then you don't need the password. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So the file, there's a setting on the server that when you open it, the first time you open it, you have to supply the encryption password. And at that point, there's a checkbox to make the server remember it. So then the server, every time it closes and opens it, reboots, all that, then it remembers it and never needs it until you upgrade from FileMaker server 18 to 19 or something like that. at which point, or moved from one server to another, like change hosting companies. At that point, you need the password. And
yeah, I'd like to add to that the password also need to be distributed to other people you trust in case you die.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's not super protected. Like giving someone that password all by itself doesn't mean anyone has access to the database. After they can open it with that, they still have to have a username and account, which is different, right? So that's, and there may be multiple full access users, but there's only one encryption at rest password.
Yeah, but at that point, they have unencrypted it, and then they could use other tools to look at data.
Maybe, yeah. But
don't store that password in a database.
Yeah, you shouldn't. Yeah, your password should be stored in a secure password vault like 1Password or LastPass. They should not be stored in a FileMaker database. They should for sure not be stored in an Excel spreadsheet. They should for sure not be stored on a piece of paper under your keyboard. I'm looking at you, Sean. I'm just kidding. I don't know. Let's see. Laura says the encryption password moves with the backup. Yes, all backups of the file have the exact same encryption. So like once you encrypt it and, you know, a couple of years go by, then you don't really have to worry about it anymore because all of those copies are going to be encrypted. So all the old ones, of course, won't be, but that's kind of a good thing. Okay. Brief horror story. Yes, even clones, I believe. Because you're also protecting the structure of the database. There was a client a few years ago that someone took over their server with remote desktop and they knew what they were doing with FileMaker. The files, the database files on the server were not encrypted at rest. So this hacker encrypted the files and then rehosted them on the server, and the client had no idea. Then the hacker let several months go by, such that now all of the backups and all the data and everything was encrypted. And then they closed the files on the server and said, if you want access to your data, pay us money. So it was a super FileMaker specific ransomware attack.
Because the person knew how to encrypt with using FileMaker's encryption.
Yeah, this is only, as far as I know, this has only happened one time. There's other ransomware attacks that are just as bad as this, and those happen. There's been a few vendors in the FileMaker space and customers that have had ransomware even recently. It's bad.
So there are evil developers, huh? FileMaker developers.
Well, in this, there's one at least that did this. Well, actually, it could just be an evil person that figured out, like read some docs on how to do this on FileMaker because they wanted to injure this one customer. Here's the thing. If you encrypt the files yourself, then you prevent any hacker from ever doing this. And that means that if you take an offsite backup, right? So let's say your server gets totally hijacked and all the data, all the files on it are gone, but because you're smart, you have a backup offsite. You have a backup on, you know, whatever other backup service you have, Amazon S3. You just copy files every so often to your desktop. You use Google Drive, whatever kind of a thing you use. If your server is completely hijacked, you can just delete the server and forget about it and not pay the ransom because you've got a file backup from last night. Make a new clean server and you're back in business in a day or whatever. But if in this case, there was no undo. They either lost several months of data or they paid the ransom. So anyway, brief aside. Oh yeah, and then there's another question, right? Containers. Containers can be encrypted or not encrypted. The default when you encrypt the file with encryption at rest is it keeps them encrypted or encrypts them, and you have to specifically check a box if you don't want them to be, the containers to be encrypted. I'm not a fan of encrypted containers, but there's certainly times where you have to do it. It just kind of scares me because the link between the record in FileMaker and the container is just completely obscured. And if that invisible linking database is lost, then the containers will never be able to be reattached to the records. But I guess everybody has to be scared of something.
And somebody asked if the backups were encrypted. Assume that's true.
Yes, the
but
backups.
I have a question about backups.
Mhm.
If you restore from a backup, there's also, you can set it for an hourly backup as well, which
Yeah.
I think is Delta, right? I don't know how to do that.
How to set up an hourly backup?
Well, I know how to make the backups because I make them, but if I need to restore it, how I use the hourly backups to restore, do we need to do something special?
Are you talking about the progressive ones?
Yeah, say it again.
There's the progressive backups, which they don't back up the entire file, they just back up changes.
Yeah, so I can restore the backup from yesterday. I have, right? So that's easy. But then how do I incorporate these changes back in the data?
Well, but with the progressive backups, it keeps it in, it still produces an entire copy of the file. It just keeps adding the changes to those files.
We might be talking about two things. So if you use a regular old backup schedule, like daily, hourly, weekly, monthly, whatever, that backs up a complete copy of the whole database. Restoring it would be the exact same process, which means you'd have to physically get access to the server and get access to that particular backup and move it down. I guess it'd be different. Linux, you don't necessarily have that, but FileMaker does not give you direct access to all of your backups in the admin console. So you have some extra work to do there. And then the second feature, which is what's it called again? The super fast one?
Progressive backups?
Yeah, progressive backup. This is like a snapshot. It happens in a fraction of a second. And it actually does make a file that looks like the regular database file, but restoring that one takes a lot longer because it's really like a pointer to a bunch of other snapshots.
Actually, I just take the progressive and just pull it right out of there and put it in, and it works just fine.
Does it? Yes, I think it can take longer because it's got a lot of pointers, but maybe not if it's. It's been a long time since I tried it.
Complete file. The progressive file that it produces is complete. It's just the way it does it is, it's just backing up the any changed records to
that file.
a complete file.
Okay.
I don't know how it does it, but it's somehow it produces a whole complete file that you can still use.
So Eric, you just take it from the progressive backup directory and then copy it to your own machine, for instance, and you can just run it from there. Is that correct?
Yep.
And then upload that version using the FileMaker client because the admin console does not have an upload feature. And then the FileMaker client can put it back on the server.
Thanks. That was very helpful.
Yeah, so it's a little bit, so the flow is something like this, right? The admin console allows you to host files, backup files, download files, delete files, but not upload. The FileMaker client allows you to upload files. And the reason that it does that is because it has to ensure that you have access to the file and can upload it. And also the first time you put the encryption at rest password, you have to sort of have that so that you can put the file on the server. Then once it's on the server, there's another thing in the admin console to enter and store the encryption at rest password.
Actually, making use of those progressive backups is so easy. It makes me wonder, I guess, what would probably would be a question of why do we produce the other backups, the complete backups, they say?
Well, when they first introduced the progressive backup feature, there was a bug in it that actually caused corruption of the database. Rarely, but every client that I had that used the feature had databases that were irrecoverably damaged. So that's one reason. So that taught a lot of people to not trust it because there was just a small bug in it that caused that to happen. But yeah, you got a good point. Well, I don't know. I just really like the other backup. It's certainly fast enough, and it makes just a regular copy of the file. It can put it to a different drive. You have choices of where it goes.
That's true.
Yeah, there's a good point. You can copy and paste the file in Windows Server back to the database folder, which is true. If you have access to a remote desktop and it's a Windows server, then you have a whole bunch more features that you can do. However, everything's kind of moving to Linux. The Linux versions of FileMaker Server are more efficient, more stable. They're much faster. They use less RAM. But they require some Linux knowledge. So I'm kind of just trusting vendors to really do a lot of that. There's a lot of.
Oh, sorry.
What were we saying?
There's another gotcha for the console. You know how you can put the you can do the external storage, right? You can pick what drive you're putting all that stuff on.
Yeah.
I know. So then there's also a feature on the console where you can remove a file.
Yes.
Well, that also removes all. I think that removes all the containers too. And that happened to me once, and I didn't know that it removed the containers. So I did a remove and did a restore from a backup, and it was just the file, but it didn't restore all the containers.
Yikes.
I didn't know that it had taken the containers away and stuck them somewhere.
Well, yeah, that stuck some, right? So when you use the remove feature in the admin console, it doesn't really delete it. It just moves it to a directory. So FYI, for people who didn't know that. I'm reviewing all my other little details about how I teach this. When I teach this module, to make sure we didn't forget anything really big, because we've got this super long meeting with all these people lurking. We have a little less than an hour left.
I guess another thing I could point out is that ODBC passwords and script steps. If you create a database design report, all those passwords get exposed out.
Yep. So yeah, if you have a script step that has password for something like an SMTP server, or like you said, like an API integration thing, ODBC, yeah, those are scary. And there's really not a way to do around that. These days they can use like an API key rather than a password. And then the API key has to get authenticated. There's more security around doing it that way.
How about putting them in a custom calculation?
I'm sorry?
If you put the key in a custom calculation, is that helpful?
There's a request to a feature request for that, but I don't think it exists yet.
Oh yeah, you're right. So to put it in a field where it's secure. So right now I think it has to be in a script step where the API key could be got from a DDR. But the API key, you can go back to the place that issued it and say invalidate the old one, and then issue a new one and update it, which is at least a good feature. But it's still not good if your API key gets out.
I use a custom calculation and put a key in there. So that's not in the script visible, at least. And think in the report, I'm not sure if the custom calculations are visible as well.
Yeah, it will be. Like, what kind of a calculation is it?
Just key with any value returns.
It's a calculated field or a custom function or
a custom function.
Custom functions.
So at least it's on one place. That's the nice advantage.
Yeah, the code to all of your custom functions is for sure in a DDR. Oh yeah, curl. Curl has tons of features, and the curl stuff's not on the test, I think, for sure. Then using the insert from URL feature, where you can specify a lot of other options, which is how you do API integration, how you have FileMaker reach out to API services and either post or get data from them.
It's very tedious.
Yeah, but also super powerful. Once you sort of have to get it, pay the price and learn it to do it once, and then you can kind of repeat it. But then certain things are really, really hard to integrate with, and other ones are easier. So Google Calendar, super, super hard. QuickBooks, probably really hard. Slack, really easy.
You think QuickBooks is hard? I mean, just that, I'm not questioning, that's a genuine question.
Yes. Well, if you do the direct QuickBooks API integration, it's extremely hard. If you use like a productive computing plugin, much easier, but still pretty hard. It's not a 1 hour thing. It's several hours.
It's still tedious.
Yeah, it is. There are many solutions to do it, and none of them are as easy as they should be. There's even a Claris Connect feature to do it, and that one I wasn't ever able to make work. That has the promise of being the easiest one, but it's still not. By the way, mentioning productive computing, I don't know if I mentioned this at the beginning. They have a full certification prep course you can buy. It's like, I don't know, 20 hours of videos or something like that. This is a jam session. That's the actual music lesson. I just wanted to make clear not to confuse the two things. So if you really want to get certified and you need all the other stuff, that's a course you can consider buying. This is kind of just more for, I don't know, this is certainly good, but this, Wednesday and today is not going to prepare someone to take the certification test. Even though there's some good gems of knowledge, hopefully, in here.
What about JSON? What kind of JSON questions are on the test?
I think there's going to be some questions that will check the grammar. They'll ask you about different functions and kind of what it does. You probably have to know a little bit about how arrays work. Yeah, like the FileMaker commands, which use semicolons and brackets, and JSON uses colons and curly brackets. Those are going to be really important things to know. Trying to think, it's going to be like a calculation. They're going to say, if you ran this calculation, this JSON function, what would be the output? Like if this is the block of JSON and I said JSON get element test, what would I get? So those would be the questions.
But just one flat table in JSON, multiple levels deep, or?
Oh, and someone just posted a slant curl library options thing. Cool. Thanks for that. I'm looking at all my notes that I wrote for things I wanted to make sure we talked about. We haven't talked about deployment all that much, maybe a little bit, and data integration. And those are both, and deployment is like 10 to 15% of the test. Data integration is 5 to 10%. The bigger areas are security, 10 to 15, scripts, 15 to 20, calculations, 15 to 20. Deployment was like FileMaker server, cloud. They won't ask you things about versions, but which they definitely used to, which was annoying. What version of Oracle 9i is compatible with what driver for the SQL on Windows, Server 2018 Rev 1. It was pretty specific. But they probably will say, what are the valid ways you can host a file? They might ask you about.
By the way, the guide says it's 10 to 15%.
Yeah, I see that for deployment, yeah. which is a lot, right? So deployment is 10 to 15, data integration is 5 to 10. What are the other things you think are going to be on there? Is it going to be like details of the admin console?
If you look at the bullets in the guide, so they're asking about configuration, location, administrative options. So like multi-machine deployments, probably.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Alternate backup folders.
Yeah, we have talked about some of that.
The sub-admin users of the admin console, maybe.
Yeah, that's true. There's those features. And maybe some stuff like configuring the server so that you can have a folder for your database files and a different folder for your containers, and they can be on different drives. And you can have the option to back up containers or not. So you can back up the database, but not the containers. Some of those things are pretty important. And then there's a path difference. So the server, it has like an RC container folder, and the desktop version puts them in a different path. So there's slightly different directories in how you get to it. But there's a, and I'm not sure if it's going to get down to that level, but there's definitely some structure, things like that you'd want to know about for container fields. Also, I really love the controls they have there. It's really, I definitely use a separate container folder. Where do you learn that? Actually, the Claris guide has links to a lot of these things. So in the deployment area, it has a link to server installation and configuration. Here's the study guide.
It's got links to the Web Direct publishing guide and the Go FileMaker Go development guide.
Yeah, I wonder if my version is even current. I'm not sure how often they update it. Yeah, new features in server. I wonder how. Let's see. Yeah, you mentioned like deployment assistant for secondary machine. God, I haven't done that in so long. I just don't know if it's that important anymore. You know,
well, if you define important as, is there a question on the test, then the answer is
yeah,
probably,
that's true. That's true. That's
right?
true.
So whether or not we think it's important. And actually, I think on Linux, it might get more important now because there's like load balancing potential, I think, right? Which there kind of was before, but anyway, I don't know. I think, I mean, certainly web publishing is like really the only reason to do a multi machine deployment, I think.
Yeah, and maybe more specifically WebDirect. Although I've been really successful just having one server with enough resources being able to handle a ton of WebDirect users.
Well, but some locations might have security specifications where they say they don't want database files on the same machine that's actually able to serve out to the web.
Yeah, so that's a really good reason to use a multiple machine deployment. So you would have the web accessible machine sitting in a DMZ.
Yeah.
Accessible to the internet.
Yep.
And then the FileMaker server machine would be behind the firewall, not in a DMZ, not visible to the internet. Something like that. Yeah, that would be a really good reason to do it. I would even go further. Usually I would, on customers that I have that have situations like that, frequently have lots and lots of databases on each server. And so I recommend that any server that has some files that are web accessible, that they don't put those files in a server where databases are not web accessible. So in other words, they sort of have a dedicated web server, web version, God, when I'm not speaking well at all, a dedicated server that they put all the databases that will have web access, either WebDirect or API or whatever.
Wow. So you spread them out on multiple servers. That performs well?
Well, this particular customer has like 10 servers. So they have, dev servers, production servers for different things. But a handful of their databases actually have WebDirect components. And so I don't like to see those databases on any of their major production servers. So they have a dedicated server just for all the WebDirect databases. And it has WebDirect databases for several different departments. It's not like one dedicated server for every database. But at least that way, you're reducing your attack surface.
I was just thinking if you had relationships between two different files.
Oh yeah, that's a really good question. There's no performance hit on that at all because there's no server to server connection. So a server, when you open up a database and it has connections to files all over the place, let's say you open up like, I don't know, application A, which has 4 data files. If those data files are on the same server as your interface or on 4 different servers, it makes no difference at all. Because it's your copy of FileMaker connects to all the data sources and does all the matching in your copy of FileMaker. There is no server to server communication. Some people might even say it's more ideal to do that. Like having like if you really, really want to go to town, you can have a dedicated server for interface and another one for data.
I thought it would be caching all that stuff on the server as far as relationships go now.
Well, no, caching happens on the desktop.
No.
Yeah, when you log into the database, it caches all the data to your machine. I don't think the server does caching. But even still, if you've got multiple servers caching the data, it's going to be even faster because they don't resolve the relationship. It's the client does the relationship resolution. The server just says, "Oh, you're asking for data. Here's your data." At least in my tests. Some people even have an interface file local, so they distribute an interface file to each person's desktop, and then the server only hosts the data file.
That was similar to one of the solutions Vince provided last night. He in one of the ways instead of perform script on server, they were also allowing the client to download a file. Actually, they wouldn't even see it. It would just download the file, perform operations there, and then take the data back for the transaction.
He did show me something like that before.
Yeah,
like a local little database that does the work.
Stored in a container file, drops it down temporarily to do its thing, and then.
Yep. That's some next level stuff. I see some of the stuff in the server area is about logs. There's a few different server logs that asks about top call statistics, what can be found. So there's what are the logs that are important?
And that's on the test?
Yeah, I do remember a question, what's in top call statistics? So the main log files there's one of them that's an access log that is actually just called access log. That one tracks, I'm going to look at my server because I don't remember. That one tracks every single time someone connects to the server, opens up a database, and disconnects. It doesn't track errors and things like that. Then there's the event log, which has, I think,
it will track an error if there was an error trying to access.
Right. And then the event log has more. That one has events that happen while users are logged on, like if they run a script that tries to go to do a next record and it beats the last one, or it tries to perform a function that's not valid, or it performs a server-side function and that can't run or something like that. Those things will all be logged in that one.
Yeah, the events log also logs if you have exit the scripts go to next record, exit after last.
Yes,
it still logs it.
Because it's an error. So basically, every error code that's experienced when a script is running is in that one.
Even if you catch them.
Even if what?
Even if you catch them scriptmatically, right?
Yes, even if you have set error capture on, those are still going to show up.
I don't think that's helpful. Sorry.
So then there's a web.
That's not the question. The question is whether it should be an error, I think.
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah. It should not be, in my opinion, that one.
I mean, that's really the issue, because even if you're capturing error, an error is an error and it should be logged, right?
Yeah.
So it's just that particular one generates an error when really it's not an error. That's the problem.
Yeah. It's like a red herring.
Should be a different error level, right? That if you have capture errors on, it should log it under a different error level than without it. So then you can go to the events log and go to it's like, hey, wait, the script creates an error here that should not, right? Right now it's a mess, basically. It's not easy to review it.
I'm looking at my server logs now just to
What the
kind of check
script
them.
debugger is for.
Oh yeah, look, I've got create recent record scripting error at line 27. So yeah, in the event log on one of my servers.
You can turn some logs on, like performance logging, right?
Yeah, so that's the next one.
By the way, Matt, you're not sharing in case you thought you were.
No, I know I'm not.
All right. Just
I wasn't sure if I wanted to see the logs on my server. I guess why not, right?
yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
Like I sometimes don't show my server in parts of it that are being recorded because,
Yeah.
everybody's weird about something. So here's my server with the log files. This one doesn't actually have top call statistics on, but the access log logs all the connections to a server. And see, this is going to show IP addresses and things like that, with other errors and things like that. Then the event log shows more detail. This is that script error that I was talking about.
Do you really want top call statistics on all the time?
No, it actually can't stay on all the time. It'll turn itself off after a period of time. But so that's kind of the next question that we're going to try to get to is what does it do, right? Let me take a look at that in a second. And it might actually be worthwhile to take a brief tour of the admin console because some people might not have seen it before. So I'll kill two birds with one stone here. We'll take a look at top call stats and a tour through the admin console. Okay, so logs. So you can actually interactively view logs here, which is cool, or you can download them. Top call stats, I can turn it on and get server stats as well. I should have looked at that box more carefully.
It says it takes a performance hit.
Enable top call only when you need detailed information. It will, so it actually tracks so many things. It tracks when a user does a find and how many milliseconds that takes. If they run a script that does a bunch of different things, it's tracking all of the really, really small components of that script. It takes some serious, you really have to buy some software to kind of read it and understand it. But just by doing that, it's going to have a little bit of performance hit, CPU hit on the server, like when I do something with a database.
Have you been able to observe the performance hit?
Yeah. Actually, no, I haven't really felt it, even though they warn you about it. But we've definitely found some utility using top call stats to diagnose and fix performance issues that were vexing. So that's definitely been good. But I think it actually turns itself off after, I don't know, an hour or 2 hours, something like that. So admin console. So this is the area where you can kind of see how much disk space is. Wow, I got to make a bigger drive. You can, that gives you 4 totally useless graphs. One of them is CPU usage. One of them is memory usage, network, and disk. And these are, none of them have any utility at all. Like you can see my server is pegged at memory, but it runs just fine. I've actually had 100 WebDirect connections on this server and memory stays right where it is. So whatever. I like to be not have a lot of RAM on my servers because RAM costs a lot on AWS. And this server is running on AWS. Here it lists all the different databases and who's logged on. Here's backups. So there's it gives you two sort of sets of backups. One of them is the default ones, which I think I turn off. Daily at midnight, next backup. Looks like that maybe is on. And then I usually go to backup settings. And here's where progressive can be turned on. And also parallel, which will do backups on multiple files at the same time. I have 3 schedules. I really like daily, weekly, and then I also have a different backup to Google Drive on this computer. So you frequently I'll do daily, weekly, monthly, and the daily one will keep multiple days, like 5 days. So there'll be 5 folders, and I can go back to 3 days ago. The weekly one will do backup once a week, and it will keep 4 copies, so I can go back to any Friday or whatever in the last month. And then if you want a monthly one, you could do like once a month, and you can have, keep 12 or whatever and go back to a year. Really,
Hey, Matt, what version of server is this?
This is 19.5. I have not updated to 6 yet.
The Google Drive, is just mounted in the Windows environment?
This is a really bad practice, and I'm embarrassed, but I'm showing you anyway. On this computer, I don't have a secondary way to reach into the server and grab backups. And Google Drive does not run when the server is logged out. But I just installed Google Drive desktop version on this computer. So periodically, whenever I want, I can just I just remote desktop to the server, and then Google Drive starts. The server does a backup to a folder that Google Drive then takes and sticks on Google Drive. So if this server is ever ransomwared, all I have to do is go back to my Google Drive version, and I'll have that one, and they can't, I'll be good to go. That's the reason I do that. But this is not a good way to do it. There's definitely better ways.
The one way we've done is we've taken, we'll take the backups and ship them off to the development server or something like that. Just have them over there on the side.
Yep. Except when you get a ransomware attack, it's going to be all your servers.
Yeah.
So ideally, what the practice is you should have something reach into the server and grab the files. You should not have the server push them somewhere. Because
except one of our best practices is not to have sharing on that server.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like some sort of an S3 script, or like a carbon copy backup thing or something like that, that utility that runs on the server. But if you have code running on the server that pushes it, if the server gets taken over, that code could get taken over and then potentially reach into the backup location and hack it. That's basically the idea. By the way,
Google Drive, you have versions, right?
Google Drive is bad because when this drive is mounted, if someone takes over the server, they'll actually have access to all the stuff in the Google Drive that this computer is logged onto, that account.
But can you delete a version in Google Drive that's from yesterday?
Yeah, so Google Drive actually keeps the long history too, which I really like. So I can just go into the Google Drive on the web and go back to the version from 6 months ago if I wanted to, depending upon how long its retention settings are.
Yeah, but a potential hacker cannot delete that version, can he?
Yeah, well, if they take over this computer, then they can actually go to the folder, which is the Google Drive folder, and do whatever they want.
But can they delete the previous versions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, like if they go to the Google Drive web page, they would have access to the whole Google Drive that this computer is logged onto. Don't do it. Yeah, AWS S3 Sync is a much better way to do it. Backups should also be, what do they call it? As a term, they should be one way. So they should go to a place where they cannot be changed by anything. So like they can write, but not write once, but not modify it after the fact. What's the word I'm looking for? Inviolate, something like that.
DVDs.
So configuration, this is where these things can all be configured. Every server, I'll go from top to bottom. So start and stop the server, change the server's name. This tells me that there's 19.6 out now. When it reboots, it automatically opens database files. These are the clients that are supported and how long. This filter option prevents people from just looking at the server. If I turn it on, you have to type a password to one of the databases before you can actually see it. Laura is saying the stop server doesn't really work. My best practice when you stop the server is to first disconnect all the current users. Like so. And then I'll get an error message that says, hey, you've been logged out. Then close the file. Then stop the server. If you do it in that order, it'll work. I still need this.
What doesn't work if you don't do that?
Well, sometimes if you just click stop the server, it's supposed to do all those steps in order, but it doesn't do them really well. If one of them hitches, so Laura's saying no, even in that order. If they don't work in that order, you have there's another problem that you have.
So first of all, you didn't close all of your databases.
I know I didn't, and I would normally do that.
Yeah, but it is true that sometimes the admin console kind of loses its mind, which is why I love the command line interface, and most people hate it, but so sometimes if it's totally jacked up, answer whoever was Laura was at it.
Yeah, she's given lots of information, which is great.
You actually just need to restart the box. I've had cases where I could not download files.
Yep. Yeah.
Especially larger ones. For sometimes you can fix it just by restarting the admin console service in the command line.
Yes.
Which
Yeah.
wasn't always there.
FMS admin restart admin server.
Yes,
that was
exactly.
that was a really bad bug in an earlier version. It's much less bad now. So like starting with 19, 18 really had some bugs where the admin console itself would crash. You'd get on here and it would show you all these users, and they were from a week ago. It was totally out of date.
Yeah.
I've actually said, and also she's saying sometimes it'll say it's closed, but it's really not. I've had that problem for sure.
Yeah.
What version of server are you running? I'm curious, because I know a lot of these issues have been addressed. But I've for sure experienced all of them in the past. Yeah, she's saying always latest version. Okay, so yeah, there's this. Well, this kind of shows. Here's a fun weird thing. The world can come crashing down FileMaker server, and the very, very, very last thing that will crash is FileMaker server's ability to host databases. The OS can be hung, the admin console can die, the backup services will die, everything will be broken, but the databases will still be hosted perfectly well to users who are trying to use them. It's got like, I don't know why that is, and it's not good. I would actually kind of rather that they stop, or like an error or something like that. But that's what I've observed. Oh, here's another tidbit I think that's important. Don't know if it'll be on the test. If you completely run out of disk space, so if you start importing and importing and importing and importing, and this goes up and up and up and up, when the server comes really close to running out of space, it will immediately close all of the database files to prevent them from being damaged. Because if the server completely runs out of space and there's nowhere to write data, then the file becomes corrupt. So at some version not too long ago, they put this self-protection feature in. So sometimes you can actually have a backup running, for example. If you import a bunch of data and then a backup runs and it uses up all your space, then the server will stop, it'll crash. Which, by the way, is why you would have this setup. I run FileMaker server on the C drive. I have all of my databases on the D drive, and I have all my backups on the E drive. So if the boot drive dies, I just get a new boot and mount the drives to it. If the data drive dies, I cry, but I still have the backup drive. And if the backup drive dies, I don't care. I just get a new backup drive.
And containers on yet another drive.
I could do that, but actually what I do is I put containers in a different folder on the D drive.
Well, the nice thing about that too is you, like if you have any virus scanning that you're doing, you could just do that on the C drive and not have to scan your databases, which would be bad actually.
Yeah, actually it's definitely something you should never do is have any application, a virus scanner or a, what do you call it? Like something that,
indexing.
Yeah, indexing for search, a backup program that's running. Those should never access the live database folder because those files are owned only by FileMaker.
And we have other, server admins who go in and kind of enforce certain things, and makes it simple to just say, you can touch this drive, don't touch that drive. That simplifies all that really well.
Yeah, and you should definitely also, I think you brought up, someone did, that you should never really allow anyone to see the database drive. Never turn sharing on the drive itself so that someone can see and actually mess with the live databases. Clients, we looked at scripts. Oh yeah, server-side scripts we didn't really talk about, but you can have a script schedule that does some action. And so rather than being controlled by perform script on server, where a user clicks a button in the database, which sends the script to the server to run, you can have some big report script that runs at 2 o'clock in the morning and exports 10,000 PDF files, imports them into emails, blah, blah, blah. So those kind of things can be scheduled. Notifications, it can send emails. It cannot send text, which is really lame. But it can send an email when like a backup is complete or when some error happens. SSL cert is super important. You should never have a server, really under any circumstances, that does not have a custom SSL cert. They're $10. It's a pain sometimes to get them to work. All of the hosting companies give them to you for free. But on your servers that you own, you should for sure have them. Connectors are where you turn on all the different modules. So FileMaker is on by default. Web publishing requires the web publishing engine. Both of these require a downloadable free version of Java, which used to be a pain, but it's much better now to install and configure. No, it's not $10 a month. It's more like $10 a year. And a wildcard cert is maybe $30 or $40 a year, and that gives you multiple domains or multiple subdomains under one domain. And if you're paying more, that's because there's a higher quality cert. There's different levels of certificate that give different levels of trust. The cheap ones are cheap, but some of them are a couple $100 a year. I actually, when I first bought one years ago, it was like $400 or $500 a year for a very highly trusted cert, such that they actually called me, they looked at my website, they checked my credit. I mean, it's a whole bunch of things that they really confirmed that I was who I said I was. It wasn't a $10 a month Twitter. Sorry, we said we weren't going to get political. Data API, turn it on or off. Server-side plugins, ODBC, so you can get have clients reach into the database and get data from like Excel or whatever, or some other database can reach into FileMaker. OData, same kind of a thing. This is much more modern. Our top call statistics file should be there at this point, but nothing's happened. So yeah, this is the FileMaker license you have. You can actually import a new license key. So if you get an update one, you can just do that. Who's the administrator? What kind of external authentication is turned on? So this is where you configure, for example, Google, and you could connect it to your Google client or turn on Active Directory down here.
So what kind of questions do they ask about this on the test? Yeah.
There will be a question with what they offer. So they'll say like, what are the, I wonder if this is one of the feature things. they'll say, which of these is right? Facebook, Apple, Google, Microsoft, like as an external authentication.
Mhm.
And Facebook's not valid. So it's Amazon, Google, Microsoft.
19.6, it's now Apple.
Oh, and Apple, yeah, 96. Oh, yeah, I gotta install that. And then Claris server is gonna look totally different than this because none of these are there in Claris server. It just authenticates. The Claris server itself, the admin console, logs into your Claris ID. Yeah, so it's a few screens are completely different. Everything around the security is totally different. What else is in here? Oh yeah, and logs. Oh yeah, so now we should actually see, here's my top call stats log, 1K. There's nothing there. But this would have a ton of information if there was a bunch of users logged on doing things. All right, that's kind of the brief tour of admin console. Any questions on any of that? We're getting towards the end here. Euler.
That didn't sound like a question.
It didn't sound like it. It sounded like a statement, a pretty bold statement. SSD. SSD, always, only, ever, especially the data drive and also the boot drive. Backup drive does not matter. The single most important thing you can do to make a FileMaker server run fast is put the data files on an SSD drive. RAM doesn't matter, processor doesn't matter, drive speed matters a ton, drive access time. That's me editorializing.
Yeah,
I had a client a couple of years ago that insisted that a spinning RAID 5 was all they were ever going to do, and they were just going to build a FileMaker server with 64 gigs of RAM and 8 processors, 8 cores or whatever, maybe more, and run it on a spinning RAID 5, which is a slow type of RAID. And a Mac Mini with an SSD would outperform that server so badly it wouldn't even be funny. But whatever. So anyway, SSD.
Are any sort of best practices, server best practices on there, or just the basics?
I kind of doubt it. There's really not a lot of best practices in anything, because I think that's a little bit of editorial stuff to some degree. Claris doesn't really seem to be in the game of best practices all that much in terms of like promoting certain ones, if that makes sense. I don't know, Lexi, are there other experienced developers in here?
That is totally true. And, there were some attempts way back when, and basically it resulted in religious wars, over like naming conventions and stuff like that. And, the thinking of the test is that it's really testing your competence, with the features. I mean, it's a bit of a gray line, right? Because like if you really do worst practices all the time, your databases are kind of going to suck.
Yeah.
But, there's already like people always complain about the questions, but it would be way too subjective. If you were, getting yes, correct or incorrect answers based on best practices.
Totally.
So if the worst criticism of the questions is it's not relevant, no good developer needs to know that, well, whatever, but at least the objectivity of the correct answer is not up for debate. right? I mean, like,
Yeah.
either Facebook is a supported security authorization
Or
or
it's
it's not,
not. Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, it's not whether it should or shouldn't be.
Right.
Yeah.
Does anybody have some insight how the test is made? What the process for that is?
Well, Alexa used to be on the committee that did it, but I think that there's a group of people, mostly inside of Claris, that write the questions and then submit them to a group of volunteer developers, both new and both experienced developers and new developers in middle, to take a beta version with 100 and some questions on it, and then they break it down to the ones that they analyze that each time they come out with a new test. That's basically the process. Many of the questions have been on there for 10 years. I think you need a 62%, 60 something percent to pass.
Was that all?
Yeah, it's a hard test.
It's a hard test, but yeah, because I only ever passed it, so I never. I was always.
I think in my whole career, I've only heard of one person getting a perfect score, and that was Wim de Court. I've never gotten perfect. I get perfect on some sections, but I've never got perfect.
Wow. Yeah, it's a stressful test. I mean, a lot of I never had a multiple choice question test that was that sophisticated.
Yeah, there's a support group person got a perfect. Oh, okay.
Well, at least in the past, they did work with professional psychometricians, which was not a word I was familiar with until I met them.
Huh.
Psycho, huh?
And so these are like professional test writers. They don't know anything about the content. You know, they literally never used FileMaker. Which is why for the entire week we were referred to as the SMEs, the subject matter experts, you know. But they know how to write and evaluate questions, right? And so my favorite terminology in the whole experience was learning about plausible distractors. And so the whole thing being that your incorrect answers, if they're just too ridiculous, then, you know, people say, okay, it's definitely not that.
Oh yeah, it's even tougher than that. There's because even through college and GE courses, I could just like skate through the answers and say, oh, that's the most likely one, and get and do pretty well in the test. Right. But in this, they would have like several right answers, and only one of them was wrong, and so then you'd have to go look at each one of them carefully.
Yep.
And only one of them was a little bit wrong, and you had to pick the one that was wrong, or something. You know, there was other things that were.
I would say here's two types of psychological questions that are for sure on there. One of them is there's 4 choices, and only one of them is right. If you look at the 4 choices, one of them will be super obviously wrong, like crazy wrong. One of them will be pretty wrong, and you can easily get those ones out. And then the other 2 are really plausibly right. And those are the 2 you have to really focus on. That's one type of question you're going to see. And another one will be kind of like what you said. There will be 5 choices or something like that. And the question will be which 2 of these are true, or which 3 of these are true. Those ones are really hard, because if you pick 2 of the 3 and you get 2 of the 3 right, you get the question wrong. So that's all the, there's 5 factorial possible answers. And if you get any one except the right one, you get the question wrong. That's why it's really hard to get 100% on the test.
Yeah. So even if you get a % as a pass on the whole test, there's a lot of questions where you have to be 100% right, not just 80% right.
Yeah, exactly.
That's also a strategy thing. Someone was just commenting about panic questions and stuff. Like, it is timed, and no question is worth more than any other question.
Right.
And so in some cases, you can do yourself well by like a quick skim and answering the simple ones. And for ones that you think are going to take longer, you know, go back and do those until you run out of time.
Yeah, at least it helps you with that too, because it just automatically takes you right back to the ones that you didn't answer yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've taken every cert test, and I usually only have 5 or 10 minutes at the end of 90 minutes or whatever. Managing
right to the end.
Yeah, managing your stress is really important. You definitely don't want to get yourself into a like an amygdala lockup state or whatever. And that's why it's really good advice. Like Alexi said, go through it quickly, take the first one, and then go back and look at it. Another strategy that I recommend is if there's a type of question you're just not going to be able to figure out because you just don't know that particular part of it, and you're going to look at it for a long time and get stressed out about it. My advice is take a wild guess and move on. If you know, it's just like a random chance kind of a thing.
You have to keep track of those ones then, right? Which ones to come back to then?
No, if you know for sure you don't know the answer, it's only going to stress you out to spend. Yeah, it's only going to stress you out to look at it. By the way, I listen to a lot of science books and stuff like that. I would bet you that everybody here believes that you should never change an answer on a test. Anyone disagree?
I disagree.
You do? Good. Because science actually shows that changing an answer, if you're really sure that the second answer is right, is better. You should change answers if you really, really think your first guess was wrong. So that's one little thing I'll throw out there.
By the way, before we ran out of time, someone was asking if we covered integration.
I don't know if we really did. I think we maybe breezed through it a bit. Oh, like importing and exporting file. Yeah, that's actually probably pretty fast. Importing and exporting file can import and export FileMaker files. Excel, I think that it's maybe slightly different formats. One of them is you can import XLS and XLSX, but you can only export XLSX, something like that. Text files in different formats, like comma separated and tab separated. Trying to think of what are the other ones are there. You might still be able to do a diff file, but probably not. DBF file, probably not. Those are some older formats. You can export records as an HTML table. I think you can you export as XML? You cannot export as JSON or import as JSON. Yeah, that might be it on that one. You can actually import a folder of photos. So if you have like a folder of 1,000 photos or whatever, you can import those and make records. So, but you cannot export.
Don't they keep threatening to remove that feature?
Oh, I like that feature.
I know, but I think it's been on the deprecated list for like ever. So.
Oh yeah. Well, there's other ways. Import photos, a folder.
Yeah.
I mean, there's other ways to do it because you can do like there's a script step you can run to look at a folder and then like import one file. You can read a directory, read the list of folders, of files in the folder, grab one on the list and loop through and just kind of import them one at a time, which would give you tons more control. Integrating FileMaker with web services. Which backend data sources are supported for ESS? How to connect external data sources and integrate them. Let's see. For web services, since FileMaker has a lot of native JSON, and it has, there's two ways that you can do a lot of web service integration. One of them is use the web viewer, which can do a lot. That's just a layout part. And then secondly, there's an insert from URL script step, which can do a lot more. You can use Claris Connect, which can directly read into your FileMaker data and then do the API integration in Claris Connect rather than in FileMaker. and it's much less code to write. But Claris Connect only supports a handful of things. Oh yeah, one other brief advice on the test. Don't expect to pass it the first time. It's really, really hard. Take it the first time for the experience to see how bad it is and to learn what areas you have to study more. So anyway, just.
Well, actually, well, if you study really hard, I don't know. I said, well, I had a lot of experience with it and I studied really hard and I passed first time every time.
If you're an experienced developer and you've passed the test already, it's probably likely that you're going to pass it. But for someone who's a new developer today, taking it the first time, most people who take it the first time these days don't pass it the first time. So just so you know, like if you have 2 or 3 years of development experience and you've got a lot of good training, you could take it and pass it the first time. If you've just started using FileMaker, usually it's like 6 months to a year of experience plus study for the test to pass it, something like that. I'm hoping to shorten that with training that I'm doing. But I don't know. I think for training, it's more important to actually help people become good developers first and become certified developers second. But both are certainly important.
How many times can you take it, the test?
Pardon?
How many times can you take the test if you fail it the first time?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know
wait
if there's you have to wait like 2 weeks, I think, between attempts, but I don't know if there's a limit.
Yeah, many times as you want. They'll take your money.
Yeah, I think so. And I know people have taken it 3 or 4 times too and failed. Again, it's hard. How long did they give you? Never long enough. I can't remember. It's like 90 minutes or 2 hours, something like that. You can either go to a testing. Yeah, you can. It does really take. It seems like a really long time. You can either take it on your computer. You can set up a camera. They watch you. You have to take a picture of your desk and show that there's nothing on it. I took the test one time and was trying to think about a question. I was staring out the window, and they said, "Hey, look at the screen. Eyes on the screen, buddy." Because they thought I was like looking out the window at an answer or something like that. So they're watching you. And of course, you can also go to a test center physically, but there's none in Greece. How much other stuff on the data integration should we talk about? Oh, it's also time right now. So if anybody has to chat, thank you so much for sticking with me, for sticking with us for this FileMaker nerd jam session. But I'll stick around for a few more minutes for any other questions too.
You want to hear my nightmare experience taking it?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I wanted to take to the closest one, right? There was one in Santa Clara, and I think it was rated better as a data center to take the test. But there was one that was just like 1 block away from where I work. And so I went over there. A lot of these places look some of them look kind of seedy. Like they're just tend to be like computer lab use areas or something.
Yeah.
And this one was like just this hole in the wall upstairs. And as soon as I walk in there, I could see they were doing construction in the next room. There's all these people working on the sawing and hammering. I said, oh man, close the door. I said, oh, maybe I can deal with that, right? But then they started banging while I'm taking the test, and I'm already in the middle of it. They're banging on the wall right in front of me with hammers. And I can hear sawing and hammering. All this, I'm just stressing out. And then as all of a sudden this saw comes right, this reciprocating saw comes right through the wall.
No way.
And starts sawing away the wall in front of
That's some stress.
Oh, and when I guess the other thing happened, I got disconnected. Like there was because you're live connected to some test center or whatever as you're taking the test to make sure everything's on the up and up, and that goes down. And so I'm already really angry, of course. I go, what is going on? I go down there and talk to the guy, and he goes, oh, we can fix that. And the good news was they it stopped the time when it got disconnected, and it allowed me to to
That's
continue with the test. And actually, I was totally shocked. I said, you know, if I don't pass this, you're going to let me take this again, right? Because it was the worst experience ever. I ended up passing it anyway. I was really shocked. I must have got the 62% or something, but
Yeah. That's rough. I've heard of another person with a horror story like that, where they showed up and there was some sort of a network glitch, the computer or something, and they had to wait like 2 or 3 hours before they could get it working. And they couldn't, like, you have to be there. Like, you can't, you know, come back another day. And sometimes the test centers are hours away for a lot of people. I've been lucky. I haven't had any of those. Taken the beta test a few times. That's long.
longer.
3 or 4 hours for the beta test.
Oh yeah, it's like it's at least twice as long, because so there's two things. One is that there's the way it's always been is there was like an A version and a B version of the test, so that not everybody gets the same questions in the same order. So you need like twice as many good questions. And plus, as we've talked about, the beta test helps exclude all of the questions that fail. So there has to be a whole bunch on there to get enough surviving questions, right? So it's long.
Yep. Why I subject myself to that, I don't know, but just always felt like it's good to, it's a community thing, right? You're like helping the
Plus,
community.
it's free.
Well, Josh
Oh,
does it
that's
every
true.
time, I think, that he is allowed to.
Yeah, I did too for years.
Crazy.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know. You get to, it feels good to like take it, I think, because you feel like you're, you know, testing and helping the quality of the test. People like Josh taking it though probably doesn't help anything, because he probably gets almost all the questions right, which makes it
And
harder for
he'll
everybody
tell
else.
you why your question was worded wrong and as to why it was
Mhm.
right or wrong either way.
Yeah, this is true. iOS app. Oh yeah. I didn't bring this up, but there's FM Quizilla and another thing called FM Sunday, which is free. And these have a ton of sample test questions. I think there's 200 or more questions in some of them. And if you get the productive computing course, they give you a ton of sample questions as well. This meetup is a test. This is a sort of a experiment to do this for free. This class has been offered for pay, but it just didn't seem like it was a good idea. It seemed like if this was a paid class, there'd be 3 people, and instead we had 64, which made it a really fun kind of a community thing. So I like that. All right. Anything?
Sweet. Thanks, Matt. It's been awesome.
Of course. Thank you so much, Lexi, for it was really good having.
Oh, I know.
It's really, really good not being the only person nerding out on all this stuff. And plus, Alexi and I go back a long time. To probably when we were both in our 20s.
Thanks, Matt, for taking time out of your Greek holiday, and happy holidays to you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, you too. I just got a question about the Starlink experience. I'm using a Starlink satellite, and I can talk about it online for anybody who's curious. It's kind of cool, right? So anywhere in the world you are, you can get a satellite dish that's small, maybe 1.5 feet across, that has an automatic motor in it. And just once you put it outside, it looks at the sky and it's looking at the thousands of Starlink satellites that are constantly going around. And I get between 150 and 200 megabit down and maybe 20 to 30 megabit up, and pretty low latency, maybe 100 milliseconds.
Wow.
I'm in Crete.
What's that cost you then?
It's 60 euros a month and unlimited data. And the dish was 700, something like that. Yeah, it is 100 in the US. It's 60 in parts of Europe, countries that don't have the same GDP as the US, like Greece. And there is an RV one, which costs a lot more. It's smaller and more high tech, but it's really cool how the thing just constantly is looking at the sky. Internet drops when it shifts position to look at a different satellite. There's like a 4 or 5 second dropout.
Needs 2 dishes.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure. So there's a stats, you get a stats tool with it. Pretty cool. And it shows you like when the dropouts are. And if you look at it, there's like every so often there's a little tiny ping where it loses internet for a second. I've never been disconnected from a FileMaker database because of it. Sometimes I forget to log out, and when I come in the morning, I'm still connected to my databases. So it's really, really solid, reliable.
So it just freezes when you're connected to a FileMaker database, and you get the spinning disk. Is that what
I've actually never noticed the blip in the FileMaker, but in Zoom, I'll get a little blip and I can't hear. I can't, that's the only time I really observed the little three second dropout thing. It's short enough to not really notice. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I've had it for just a few months. And I love that you can be anywhere in the world that has electricity and have super high speed, reliable internet. Like, it just seems kind of crazy and kind of great.
And what can you get and create locally?
Oh, at the house we're staying in, all you can get is DSL, and it's about 1 megabit. And probably like 200 or 300 kilobit up. Greece has really good internet if you're in a big city, but if you're anywhere outside the city limits, it's DSL only. And the farther are you from the city, the slower it's going to be. And we're kind of right in between 2 villages or between 2 places, so it's not. Yeah, it's not. I wouldn't have been able to live here if I didn't have Starlink.
Thanks.
Sure. How does upload work on Starlink? Like I said,
I live out in Western Massachusetts, and it's almost the opposite.
Yeah.
A lot of the little towns got fed up of having only DSL, so they started doing town-owned fiber. And in the town, like in the bigger towns, you were stuck on cable.
Right.
So you could get better internet out in the boonies.
Interesting.
They're working on that out towards our house because we only have 1 cable service, and it doesn't even hit all of the country areas. They're trying to put the fiber out to the little towns.
So your audio issues with Zoom, do you think that was related to that beep you were talking about, or is that your Starlink, you think?
I don't think it was Starlink. I had so much bandwidth. I think it was actually a audio setting in Zoom. I've been in graduate school for music. And so I had all of the Zoom settings turned music up all the way, stereo, super high res, blah, 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 when we were taking classes with it. And I just forgot about them. Those features are no longer even supported in Zoom. Once I found them and turned them off, there's not even a way to turn them on anymore. So I think that was it. I think like when there's 60 people on a call and you have your audio set that way, for whatever reason, the audio coming back into me just didn't work. It happened only 1 or 2 times today. It was really much better. When I looked at my settings in Zoom, there's a settings thing and you have a statistics channel. It shows you the exact amount of packet loss. And 2 days ago, I had packet loss between 40 and 100%, lots of times. And right now it's at 0.03. Thanks, everyone.
And do you have your dish on the roof? And do you have a 360-degree view of the horizon?
It's on a balcony that has a 360-degree view. It's sitting on the ground. It's not, but it definitely has enough of a view. There's a little like overhang in one area, but when you set it up, it'll tell you, there's like a little app on the phone, you just aim your camera at the sky and it'll tell you whether it's going to have enough visibility. And then when you plug it in, it will like spend a couple of hours looking all around at all the satellites, and it will tell you if it needs to be moved or not. I tried it on, this house has balconies, really small ones on each side. And I tried it on the other 3 and it didn't work in any of them. So the last one worked really good. Excuse me, really well.
Thanks.
Sure.
All right.
Well, thanks. That was great.
Thank
Hey,
you.
thanks, guys. Gonna run. That was
Yeah,
awesome,
yeah,
Matt.
we went over time, but it's really fun. And I'm really, really glad you all joined me. Thank you. Oh, and
Maybe some of these questions.
one quick last thing for the few of you who are still on. There's the YouTube video of this is posted on the link is posted on the meetup page if anybody wants it.
Oh, for the first one?
And today, this was all
Oh.
recorded too.
All right, thanks.
I'll stop recording now.